Welcome to primary election night coverage on Arkansas PBS. We'll be with you for at least the next 3 hours. Enough time, we think, for the major statewide races to shake out. Enough time to give you a good idea of the major party candidates, the nominees, or those candidates who are or appear to be destined for runoff primaries in 3 weeks. So we'll be bringing you the numbers in the Democratic and Republican campaigns for governor, lieutenant governor, U.S. Senate, Secretary of State, and the congressional districts and the like. But permit us to state the obvious. Much of the suspense in this primary season and almost all of the fire and fury has been on the down ballot side, the campaigns for Arkansas House of Representatives and the Senate. A multitude of races to watch this season, and we'll be reporting all of them tonight as the returns permit. On board to assist tonight with insight and analysis, a pair of political pros, Dr. Jay Barth, Professor Emeritus of Political Science at Hendrix College, and a longtime Democratic activist. Jay is a familiar face to our Arkansas Week audience, but so is Robert Kuhn, Republican strategist and managing partner of Impact Management. Together, Jay and Robert, partners in the political survey research that's undertaken through the Hendrix Political Science Department and Talk Business and Politics, the poll. And also at the desk tonight, Marty Ryle, the External Affairs Director of Arkansas PBS, who is rumored to know something of Arkansas politics. A programmatic footnote, if we may. You are by now almost certainly aware of an almost unspeakable tragedy earlier today in Texas, where a gunman slaughtered 14 children and a teacher at a Texas elementary school. President Biden will be delivering a statement at approximately 7:15 tonight. Here on this channel at PBS Arkansas, we're going to remain with election coverage, but want to advise you that the PBS World channel, the PBS World Network, which is widely available in our state, will be carrying that presidential statement live. So there. Also tonight, on board as well, Ronick. Not yet? Okay. We're going to do chit-chat here a little bit, I'm told, because we're not ready with our remote. I got thrown. I'm sorry about that last-minute development there. Gentlemen, was I off? Much of the smoke, anyway, and the fire on the GOP side this season. Robert?
A lot of votes on the GOP side so far through early voting, which is interesting. I think that could throw a few curveballs here and there just because you've got folks that maybe weren't expected to turn out. You got Republicans turning out in droves, definitely higher than they have in previous midterms especially.
Yeah, and Marty Ryle, I think we can quantify that, in fact, in terms of early voting.
Yeah, the last numbers I saw on the Republican side of early voting was somewhere around 160,000. And if you look back at when you look at past elections, you look at 2018 and 2022 as comparable years because presidential years usually see a larger turnout. 2018 is a non-election year, so you kind of compare 2022 to 2018. But the early vote numbers we're seeing for 2022 are exceeding the presidential year early vote numbers. Now, it remains to be seen, and we'll find out here in just a little bit, are more people voting early and instead of Election Day, so the Election Day numbers are down and kind of evens out, or is there a swell of voters coming out this time to participate and vote in these elections? So that's going to shake out, but I think what we're seeing is, at least in the early voting, is a big turnout, much bigger than we usually have.
Yeah, a great many Arkansans are greatly enamored of early voting, but Jay Barth, is there not a possibility of a bit of mischief this year in the early voting, guys?
So I think a couple of things about the early vote. You know, we've seen in other states, especially in the 2020 cycle, you know, the difference between the two parties when it came to early voting versus Election Day voting. And in the Trump era, there's been a kind of a commitment on the Republican side to vote on Election Day. Either that hasn't made it to Arkansas, or instead we're beginning to see some movement away from that kind of Trump era phenomenon. But we do know that some Democrats did cross over. Folks who usually vote in the Democratic primary, they saw more of the action, at least tonight, on the other side, whether it's creating some mischief for a party that they are don't have affinity for, or instead, in many of these places, it's going to choose who is their ultimate representative, and they want to be part of that action. And so it's a little bit of both. It may end up balancing out in terms of what the real impact is, but I think there is going to be some of that that's going to be really interesting to watch in some of these key precincts, key counties where Democrats tend to historically overperform.
Yeah, Robert Kuhn, any thoughts on that?
Well, I think you've seen historically, early voting as a trend has risen for everybody. I mean, it goes up every year just a little bit more as a share of the electorate. When you look at the partisan breakdown, Democrats have kind of risen on average about 3%. Republicans have kind of been more like 5%. So they've started to, they started off at a lower part of ratio of early voting to election day. So they're starting to play catch up. They're starting to grow a little bit faster. So it is a trend, but I do think that there's a possibility that there could be crossover voting. I think there's a real possibility that there are folks that maybe voted in 2016 with Sarah Huckabee Sanders at the top of the Republican ballot this time, maybe trying to, grab some of that enthusiasm you saw for the first time Donald Trump was on the ballot. And I think there's a possibility that she's bringing some of those people back that maybe just haven't come in, 2018 or 2020.
Yeah,
Well, I was going to say one of the things to look at is, in the general election, you'll have the political parties that will help drive turnout. They will call endlessly to the Republicans based on their vote history and their patterns and all that kind of thing. In the primaries, you don't have that. The party's not going to spend their money turning the vote out in the primary. The candidates are left, to do that themselves, and most of them don't have the money to do that. So what you're seeing in the turnout is kind of grown on itself from what they're seeing on TV and picking their candidate and going out to vote for it. There's not a driving force as far as the parties or the candidates calling them and reminding them to go vote and all those things that you see in the general election.
Yeah, to pick up on what Robert Kuhn was saying a second ago, though, Marty, and everybody, is there, with Ms. Sanders on the ballot, is Donald Trump on the ballot in a way in Arkansas that he might not be, say, in another state?
Well, I think Sarah certainly hopes so. Yeah, I think she hopes so. I mean, I know, the polling had her with a huge lead, 75, 80%, and she didn't sit on that lead. I mean, she had a bus tour here the last 3 or 4 weeks. She's gone around the state, and she's had big crowds, and so she's tried to generate that enthusiasm, and I think, she's closely tied to Trump, and he's very, he's still, among the Republican Party, he's still very, very popular in this state, and so I think that she would like that, and certainly John Bozeman. Every ad he has run, I think, in this campaign has said he's got Donald Trump's endorsement, and I would think so.
Well, at least in trying to tie themselves to Mr. Trump, guys, that's pretty good. I can't think of a nominee really who hasn't.
Well, I think that's what's unique about her. I think Donald Trump is really hard. I don't think his brand is transferable to most people. I think just because you got a photo with him, that is not a golden ticket, right? Because there's a lot of people that try to use his name, put him on a mail piece, that maybe it's a real photo or it's a Photoshop photo. People know that Sarah Huckabee Sanders worked for him. She's viewed as a staunch supporter of his because of standing up in the press briefing room daily defending, the White House when she was there. She doesn't have to convince people that she's on Team Trump. They know it. His approval rating amongst Republicans runs 90%. Her approval rating amongst Republicans runs 90%. It is transferable in that respect for her, I think uniquely for her, and I do think that could lead to some people maybe get excited again, in this cycle.
Yeah, hasn't necessarily, Jay, worked in every state for every candidate.
Right, and I think, Senator Bozeman, for instance, I don't think is seen as a legitimate a connection to President Trump. I don't think it works as well for him. He certainly used it and tried to make that connection, but I don't think it's as authentic, to make Robert's point again. I do think whenever you have kind of unexpected voters show up in primaries, it really creates challenges for candidates on whether they targeted the right voters. Did they send the mail to the right voters? Did they make the phone calls to the right households? And that can lead to some real unpredictability. And so I will not be shocked if we do see some odd things happen tonight, both for that reason and because we're seeing the first cycle after redistricting in a lot of these legislative races where there aren't kind of locked in patterns from the past 10 years. And so that's going to make, I think, for a potentially pretty interesting night, especially as we get down the ticket.
Yeah, and more on that in just a second. As I mentioned a little bit earlier in the broadcast, also on board tonight, Ronak Patel. He's the politics reporter for KUAR Public Radio in Central Arkansas. Many of the state's top Democratic officials and some of the candidates, perhaps most of them, are gathered at the Red, White, and Blue Events Center, just a few yards from the state capitol. And Ronak, how's the atmosphere there? What are we seeing?
So far, Steve, only a few of the candidates have came in, so we're still waiting for all of them to come in. But the ones that I've talked to, they're not really nervous. A lot of them say that they're confident with the campaigns that they ran, and even if they lose, they're still going to move forward, and it's not going to impact them too much. Back to you, Steve.
Okay, and well, one question, if I can, are we expecting a great many of the candidates there tonight, or do we know?
Some of them are also having their own parties at different venues, so they'll try to drop in here and then drop in at the other venues. So I'm not sure how many of them will spend the whole night here.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a fairly fluid situation, but we'll continue to watch that and come back to you. We will also be tonight checking in on Republican headquarters. What we think is going to happen here is within a fairly short time, after the polls close, we're going to have, Marty, I think a fairly strong trend indicated in the Republican gubernatorial primary, lending a hand tonight as well. Christina Munoz, who's back in reporting mode. She is at the Embassy Suites in Little Rock, where much of the Arkansas Republican leadership will be tonight. Christina, how is it going there?
That's right, Steve. Very good to see you. Good evening to you. And yes, it's been a few years for me, but I'm very glad to be back here on Arkansas PBS. And this is a little bit of the calm before the storm, and yet this is a kind of the pre-party atmosphere. People are coming in, the stickers are being handed out. There's, of course, food and drinks, and while it's getting louder in here, as you may be able to tell, the party atmosphere doesn't really take off until those numbers come in. And as you alluded to, if you believe polling is accurate at all, there is a belief here that the Sarah Huckabee Sanders campaign will do very well in this primary election, as well as the John Bozeman campaign. Both seem to be very confident and excited, and French Hill, Congressman French Hill, is also expected to be here. His team is here. None of them expected to show up until those numbers start rolling in. That being said, once the numbers do start rolling in, the expectation is that they will be here. We will see, of course, as the night unfolds, to speak shortly after that. But you know, you never know until the numbers come in. That's why you play the game. So we are here for the Republican Watch Party throughout the evening, and we will be doing our best to bring the candidates to you throughout the night.
Well, Christina, I would have to say, just based on the initial optics here, the noise level at Republican headquarters is a bit above what it is at the Democratic site. I think you're going to have quite a bit of action there tonight.
I think you're probably right, and like we said, I think they're feeling pretty confident and ready to have a celebration here tonight, and so we will be along for the ride to see how it all plays out.
All right, Christina Munoz, and we'll be coming back to you in short order in due course. Everybody, we've got as mentioned off top, we have a number of significant races to cover tonight, and why not begin with the state constitutional race. We just were talking about the Republican gubernatorial primary, and there is a primary. Marty Ron?
There he is. Doc Washburn got in the race pretty late. He decided to run against Sarah Huckabee Sanders, she's as Robert mentioned, her popularity in the state, and is it's going to be tough to overcome. And just be realistic here. This is not going to be much of a race. It's going to be over with pretty quickly.
Yeah, I would think so. Any disputing over there, I can't imagine it.
Can't dispute it at all.
It'll be a shock if it hangs around for very long.
Well, everybody ought to have a primary every now and then, too. But on the Democratic, there is, after all, a Democratic primary too. And Jay, 5 candidates?
There are. And I do think one of the real stories of this primary season has been Chris Jones, who's never run for office before, really kind of blowing out the field with a very effective initial ad that really went viral, got national attention. He was able to get some good fundraising out of that, but he also really was able to coalesce his support in the Democratic Party, which he was not that well known within the Democratic establishment when this campaign began. He didn't have long ties to the state. He had been away, as we know, at school, and then he had come back to do his innovation hub work and had really begun to build connections, and it really cemented this year. And I think he's run a very impressive campaign season. The endorsement by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette was very full of praise for him as a candidate as they endorsed him along with Sarah Huckabee Sanders on the other side.
Yeah, Robert Kuhn, his academic and professional credentials would seem to be just terrific. But how far will that carry somebody in a
I
year
think
like
he's
this?
a great candidate. I think he clearly took hold of the Democratic nomination from the get-go, like Jay said, with a great ad and just really captured everybody. I think there's a lot of positives you can say. I think politically, I don't think the state is headed that direction. So, I mean, I think he brings a lot to the table. You know, he'll be wanting to talk about different ideas and get into debates and things like that. Whether that happens, I don't know. I will say what you said earlier about everybody having a primary. You know, I think the fact that Sarah Huckabee Sanders had a primary opponent was more reason for her to put more dollars out there, probably raise more money, get out in the state more instead of just kind of kicking back and waiting. And I think that likely has some impact on other parts of the state.
Well, go ahead.
I was going to say one important thing is to have an equality candidate, like Jay mentioned, is that you know, if you look back in the earlier days, 20 years ago or 25 years ago, or even further, the Republican Party, you know, if the party couldn't find a candidate for governor, then the chairman had to run, because that's how you qualify as being a party and being on the ballot access. And you don't want to have somebody up there who's going to drag down the down ticket people in the House and the Senate and all that. So what the Democrat Party has done has got a credible candidate who's got credentials, who can raise some money and be respectable, and is not going to be a drag on the ticket. And so that is first and foremost what you want to do, and that's what they've done. So again, yeah, he's got an uphill battle in a hard red state, but he's not going to drag down the ticket.
Well, no, I'd say just the opposite. There may be some pockets where he actually propels some turnout because he does have great appeal, obviously in the African American community, and he would make history as an African American statewide elected official. But he also, I think, in more rural areas, especially because of his religiosity, he really has a natural connection there. And then he also, through his you know, very impressive credentials, academic credentials, he really connects well with kind of more traditional urban voters. For the Democrats. So I think he actually is a good candidate for turnout and to make things as positive as they can be in what we know is going to be a tough year.
Yeah, no, and I think that's right, and I didn't mean to imply otherwise. I mean, I think he's a good candidate.
Yeah, we have, and everybody has remarked at how superlative those commercials of his have been, television commercials have been. I mean, they've been works of art. I mean, Academy Award level. But can they make that much difference in a year like this?
Yeah, I think the real concern that he has to have as a candidate is that I think they thought they would get more national fundraising because of Sarah Huckabee Sanders' very deep connections to Trump, and that really hasn't come to that level. They've certainly gotten some money off of those ads, but they haven't gotten, I think, the amount of money that you would expect off of something so high quality. And you know, the Democrats have challenges all over the country, and you know, Democratic voters and donors who are looking for races to give to, they got a lot of other places to go before they go to a race like this that is such a long shot in Arkansas.
Yeah, Marty?
No, I think he's right. It's gonna. I mean, if you look at what's going on nationally, it's shaping up to be a tough year for the Democrat Party all around, and in a state like this, it is going to make it even more difficult. And I think that goes for, you know, the Senate and the congressional races as well.
Yeah, and we have an incumbent Democratic president who's coming up on the ending his second year of his administration, and at or near record lows in public acceptance. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break and be back with more of our coverage. Stay with us.
Since 2010, The rates of mental health issues such as anxiety, depression, burnout, and suicide have skyrocketed among American farmers. The growing season will follow 6 Arkansas farmers through a year on their land, and hopefully will provide some insight along the way. I'm your host, Ben Dickey of Arkansas PBS. Join us on the growing season.
Look for new episodes on the second Friday of each month, available wherever you get your podcasts.
When it comes to news and current events in Arkansas, we keep you informed with Arkansas Week each Friday and Sunday. But what about the rest of the week? Get insights, exclusive previews of our upcoming episodes, and much more by signing up for our public affairs newsletter. Don't miss a thing. Sign up at myarpbs.org/signup and get updates you won't find anywhere else right to your inbox.
Stream the best of PBS on any device with the PBS Video app. All your favorite drama, history, science, news, and documentaries, all in one place. Watch your PBS station live or catch up on the shows you missed. Support your PBS station and you can get Passport, giving you full seasons, early releases, special collections, and more.
Download the PBS Video app or watch online.
For decades, we've been exploring the state, hiking the trails, floating the rivers, and meeting the great people of Arkansas together. We have shared the untold stories of our great state and have brought the world home to you through the most trusted American institution, PBS.
We welcome you, current viewers, new audiences, and new voices to connect with us, public media in Arkansas, whenever and however you choose.
We will uncover even more stories about the natural state. We will illuminate the people behind the scenes, and we will feed your curiosity about your home and your neighbors.
But we can't do it without you. Please join us by becoming an Arkansas PBS member today. With your support, we will continue to educate, entertain, and uncover fresh local stories for Arkansans of all ages.
Make your gift today and join the Arkansas PBS family. And thank you for bringing us into your homes.
For almost 4 decades, Arkansas Week's been keeping you informed of the news and issues that matter most. Featuring the newsmakers, the experts, the analysts, the journalists, the thought leaders who shape life and news and opinion in Arkansas. So join us as we continue to provide in-depth conversation, in-depth coverage from our new, modern, state-of-the-art studio home, where we'll cover the news as never before. So stay connected to the pulse of Arkansas with Arkansas Week. And we are back with Robert Kuhn and Jay Barth and Marty Ryle. Running the races here before voting ends. We got about 10 more minutes before the polls close and the numbers start to arrive. Marty, I think there are approximately 230 candidates for the Republican nomination for lieutenant governor this year. Am I off by?
Yeah, it's not quite that many, but I tell you, it's been quite the race, and I think it's the most competitive race of the statewide races out there. And you know, Leslie Rutledge, I guess the question tonight is, does she get over 50%? And there's you know, she's got some well-funded opponents, and if she does get over 50, she's pulled off a remarkable feat, because if you look at the top 10 Republican counties where the vote typically comes from, you got Jason Rapers from Faulkner County right here where we are. That's one of the top 10 counties, and that's his base, so he'll pull a big number of votes out of there, you would think. Greg Bledsoe's from Benton County. That's a top Republican county where a lot of votes come from. He'll pull a lot of votes out of there. You got Joseph Wood from Washington County. That's a top vote getting Republican county. He'll pull a lot of votes out of there. Then you got Doyle Webb and Saline County. So you got these big Republican vote counties where you have candidates that is their base. And so they should pull some votes from there that I think makes it harder for her to get to 50. So she pulls that off. She's really made it a strong, she's shown she's a strong candidate. Now, if this turnout turns out to be as big as we think it is, then you would, I would think that probably helps her. But all these candidates have spent Bledsoe and Rapert and Rutledge have all spent a significant amount of money on TV. I think Doyle Webb put more of his money into the mail on his campaign. But there's a lot of ifs and ands out there, but there's a lot of candidates.
Yeah, guys, how do you think it's going to break? You see it breaking in any particular way?
Well, our last poll right before early voting began had it right at 40%. There was about 25% undecided. So that, I think, is, as you're suggesting, that may be the interesting moment of the night is, does she get just over that or just under that? I do think your point, Marty, is right on target, is that these candidates who she's facing are going to have some geographical points of strength. I do think we did see some interesting thing in our polling. She and Central Rayport were really drawing from very similar voters, kind of a Trump-like voter. Greg Bledsoe was drawing a very different kind of voter, a little higher education level, and maybe not, certainly very conservative, but not quite as Trumpist in his pool of voters. And so he may actually be in an interesting place, especially to draw in Northwest Arkansas from those kind of little bit more affluent, a little more higher education, what we might have historically called country club conservatives, who are small in numbers now but still matter in a primary like this.
Yeah, and of course his mom's been in the Senate now for what, a dozen years or so there, Robert Kuhn.
Right, and I will say Bledsoe also was polling from some of the Jan Morgan voters and some of the Jake Beckett voters. So I thought he kind of had a really interesting coalition of people. That can be good. I mean, sometimes you want to draw little pieces from everybody, but that also sometimes can mean that you don't have a real solid base of support that's, you know, in one place. So it could cut both ways. I do think, to Marty's point, if turnout is up, we suspect that it is. We don't know for sure. We won't know till we see some numbers. But you know, if it's officially up, how have people spent their money? I think the candidates on TV will have an advantage, because whether you were targeting somebody as much or not, they're going to see your message. If you're targeting a very defined group of historical voters and there's 50,000 new people in the, you know, turning out, they probably weren't on your mail list. I think that's going to be a challenge. But the geographic dynamics are interesting. I think Leslie Rutledge is going to be really close. I think with that many candidates, this thing is hard to get 50. I just think that you're just carving it up way too much.
Well, and the other factor I forgot to mention there is Chris Beckett. With as many ads as Jake Beckett's had on TV, is there some bleed over of the Beckett name that he benefits from?
Yeah, 2 Becketts in one season. Well, this has to be noted also, and there were formal complaints against Attorney General Rutledge, and that's that she's in her 8th year of incumbency now as Attorney General, and the public service announcements that she has been running for practically the entire length of her tenure were the subject of some formal complaints. It was alleged that she was basically using settlement money or taxpayer money to run commercials for boost her own image. Yeah. Now, that was her use of that money was upheld legally by the Ethics Commission, though.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that she was doing anything that any other AG has never done before. I mean,
she just did a lot of it.
She did a lot of it. I think every AG across the country that has that, you know, you typically see those consumer-oriented, because that's part of their job. Clearly, you know, I think Republicans picked at, you know, Democratic AGs when they would do that out of partisan reasons. But all of a sudden, when you have candidates that want the same job as you, they're gonna use that as a leverage tool. I mean, I think it's a smart complaint to air, but I don't know that she was doing anything unique.
Yeah, Marty?
No, I think that's right, and even you know, she took her name out of those ads for some time after those complaints. But I think Robert's right. I mean, we've seen the Democrat attorney generals do it and Republican attorney generals do it, and whoever I guess Tim Griffin's probably, you know, if he wins the nominations, the next attorney general, I don't know. We'll have to ask Tim if he's going to do it, but you know, it's. I don't think it's something that has probably gotten a lot of traction in this primary. I know the only negative that, I won't say negative, you know, we don't like to use that word in politics. I know these guys don't, but contrast ad was Bledsoe, where Greg Bledsoe, where he contrasts himself with Senator Rayport and Leslie Rutledge a little bit, and he's touched on that some in the campaign. And I know Senator Rayport, I've seen him through some of his social media has done that as well and talked about that issue, but I don't know that that's gotten any traction.
We have watched over the decades as the office of Lieutenant Governor has attracted more and more attention, mainly because the incumbent in the office has demanded more or attempted to secure more and more attention, plainly use the office as a launching pad, stepping stone, Jay?
Yeah, it's really different from, you know, when I was a kid, where it was really totally a part-time job and a little bit of a dead-end job. Although some of the lieutenant governors would attempt to go to the next level, they often got stymied. But I think, you know, starting with Bill Clinton's last term, where Jim Guy Tucker obviously became governor, I think since then we've really seen a trend of higher quality candidates who have some statewide reach, who have some fundraising ability, who've really stepped up to run for that office, and it's often paid off for them in terms of their later steps of their career.
We're going to interrupt just a second and go via Skype to a very senior Republican official, Janelle Fulmer. Welcome to the broadcast. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Steve. I'm not sure how I feel about being called senior, but thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Well, that's your rank and not your age. We all know that you've yet to achieve your 25th birthday. So, but
Good. Thank you for clarifying that.
All right. Nor have I my 30th. But for that matter, are we looking here at a Republican romp this year, or is the loyal opposition? Do you see, is there room for the loyal opposition here to sneak somebody in there?
Well, of course, we never take anything for granted, but we feel very confident that the candidates that will come through this nomination process will be elected in November. We're excited and looking forward to that, and we're going to do everything we can to make it happen.
Well, as chair, when you survey the political landscape, the temperature, if you will, of the state, what is there a common denominator among your major party candidates, or for that matter, the down ballot candidates as well?
Well, I think largely we are concerned about Arkansans and what they're feeling, the trouble that they are having making ends meet with inflation, with the cost of gas, the cost of groceries. We're concerned that mothers can't find formula for their infants. These are all very big concerns, and of course, federally, we hope that we can turn the House and the Senate red so that we can hopefully bring some relief from the national level. And then here on the state level, I think we're all just as concerned statewide about making sure that more money stays in the pockets of our hardworking Arkansans, and that we can make ends meet, and we can just do our best for our families. Well,
the matters that you just mentioned, Madam Chair, are lunch bucket issues, pocketbook issues. Is there something, to what extent are cultural issues driving this year?
Well, we've seen some questions about what might be happening at the Supreme Court, if that's what you're referring to. And certainly in Arkansas, we are a very pro-life state. I'm sure there will be some who would disagree, but we're seeing at the ballot box just how important these conservative issues are, including pro-life issues. Well,
yeah, abortion is one, but there are others too, and they were aired in the last session, for example, of the General Assembly. Critical race theory, gender, matters such as that, and they, in some of the legislative campaigns anyway, they've played a fairly large role, correct?
They did. We saw a lot of that in the last legislative session, and addressed a lot of issues that are important to Arkansans and to families, and I think that the voters are going to continue to vote for those types of policies because that's what's of concern to them.
Ideologically, come January, do you think the next governor will confront a General Assembly that may be more moderate, less, or more conservative than the one that's sitting now?
I think that's going to be up to the voters, and we're looking forward to see who comes through these primaries so that we will know just who we're going to get elected in November.
Well, there has been much written about, locally even, and nationally as well, about a breach between the GOP, certainly the congressional GOP, and some of the state organizations, and the American corporate community, the business community. Are you seeing that?
I think certainly there are always differences that we have to try to breach, whether it's with corporate America, whether it's amongst ourselves in the General Assembly, wherever it is. Of course, Republicans are independent thinkers. We are going to always have differences of opinion, and so it's going to be very important to try to work together And I think we can do that, and I think we can reach across those divides with the corporations as well, and understand that we can't always agree, but we will work together where we can, and we can accomplish a lot of things.
Well, not to put too fine a point on it, but a number of people have pointed out that they never thought they would see the breach, for example, between Republican candidates and, or for that matter, Arkansas legislators and institutions such as the State Chamber of Commerce, which we have seen this year. Where is that going to take us?
Again, I just think that's something that we're going to see when we get through this primary, who our candidates are going to be, and we're just going to have to find out where we can work together with the chamber.
Janelle Fulmer, the Arkansas State Republican Chair, thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Thank you, and see you next time. On to the radio. Any thoughts, gentlemen, on Chair Fulmer?
Well, I think our the emphasis on pocketbook issues, on bread and butter issues, I mean, was clearly the place where the Republican Party here in Arkansas and nationally wants to go, and I think it's the right place to be as a party that's outside and can be critical of the performance of the end party nationally. Less so in Arkansas, of course, because of Republican dominance here. But certainly, it's an attempt to nationalize this conversation, which has worked quite well for Republicans in Arkansas for the last handful of cycles.
Yeah, Robert Kuhn. I would note, though, to follow up on what the chair and I were discussing just a second ago, there have been some pretty serious, profound breaks between the state's corporate community and some of the Republican incumbents, anyway, leading to open endorsements of challengers.
There have been. There's a couple different, groups that play in this cycle. You've got the Conduit for Action group that a lot of people are familiar with. It tends to be with folks that are, further to the right on the spectrum, ideological spectrum. You've got the Chamber of Commerce is engaged a little bit more aggressively this cycle. You've got the Common Ground group that's overlapping some with the chamber efforts. It's going to be interesting to see, does anybody carry the night? Is it a mixed bag? I tend to think geographic, candidate-specific races are going to play out based on, the local issues, and maybe more than, one team is going to win them all. But I would say that I love to see the chairwoman talk about kitchen table issues. I think in a lot of ways, politics can get pretty lazy. You hear the same things over and over again of, this issue or that issue, or I'm for this short list of things. It's really impactful when you're talking about things that, families, that, seniors, that folks that really, what do they care about? What
gasoline,
are they waking up thinking about?
gasoline.
Yes, food prices.
Diesel.
Baby formula. For some people, that's a big deal. It's not for my household, but it is for others. So kitchen table issues are important, and I'm glad to hear that we're talking about them.
Yeah, Marty Ron.
No, I think that's right, and it's like back in the old 1992 presidential campaign, James Carville said it's economy stupid, and that to keep the focus on the economy during the course of that campaign. And I think in this off year, I think you're going to see a lot of that nationally. That from the Republican side is going to be talking about the economy. That you can have that debate and that argument over whose fault it is and what solutions are best for it. But at the end of the day, it does come down to pocketbook issues. And if folks out there are paying more than $4 a gallon for gas, and they're seeing their grocery bill go up, they're looking for somebody to blame and to make it better. And so I think.
Guess who?
Yeah, that's right. So.
There's something that you can always play the blame game. Sometimes the blame is well founded. Sometimes it's not the person's fault that you're blaming. But
sure.
There's a question that we ask a lot in polling, and it's are things headed in the right direction? Or are they off on the wrong track? That's a pretty simple. Are you happy with where things are going? And you can a lot of times infer how do people feel about the environment around them politically, where the election is going to go, because it's a reflection of all those things.
Follow the S&P and
exactly.
Yeah. But I think it's super fascinating. I mean, her closing statement that we'll look for those opportunities where we can work with the chamber. It's fascinating that a Republican Party chair is thinking in that way, and I think it really shows where we are as a nation in terms of a political realignment. Is that we are really beginning to see. Some of those traditional Republican, more corporate interests really beginning to take some steps away as more as other voters who historically would have been Democratic, especially white rural voters, have really come into the fold, driven by the Trump phenomena. So we're in the midst of a really fascinating time in American politics, and even in Arkansas, which is a state where there's not much, there's maybe not much division right now. We even see some of the glimpses of that new alignment of politics here.
Yeah,
well, there is a lot of that. I mean, if you look at even nationally, the tech companies are much more liberal and aligning with the left, whereas in the old days, the corporations, like you said, the chamber and all those were aligned to the right, and I think you saw a lot of that when Trump ran for president the first time. When if you look at Michigan and the old Rust Belt and the blue collar workers that he had that appeal with, and I think you see that in Arkansas among some of the rural folks. So I think there is kind of I think both parties are kind of feeling their way in this kind of new world of alignments out there.
Yeah, but it's not corporate altruism; it's corporate capitalism at work here for the entire length of Governor Hutchinson's tenure here. He would go around the corner and tear his hair out over some of the things that were being proposed in the General Assembly. He was able to tamp some of them down, Jay.
Yeah.
Not all of them, though.
No, and in many cases it was big, huge corporations that just happened to be based in Arkansas, who were some of the greatest critics of some of that legislation.
Actively opposing.
Yeah, whether it was on LGBTQ issues, whether it was on other issues where there was discord, and I think that's what really interesting. Some of these big, especially Northwest Arkansas companies, now they certainly have a base here, and they certainly still have some power here, but they are almost seen as outsiders in this state in an interesting way as they have become more diverse in how they operate. I mean, Walmart is in essence in many ways a tech company right now, because how it operates, how it moves its products is now with people sitting at computers rather than what was historically the nature of that Arkansas-born company.
To me, one of the signal quotes of the last 4 years anyway was when in debate on one of these hot button cultural issues, and I think it was the gentleman from Jonesboro, Mr. Ladyman, who said in debate, I'm tired of, and I may have this wrong, I'm tired of Walmart telling me what to do, or I'm tired of the state chamber telling me what to do. An unprecedented statement, from a state legislator, but particularly from a Republican state legislator. Robert Kuhn.
No, I think that's an issue. I think, what Donald Trump really harnessed was populism, and populism has always been strong in Arkansas, as you well know. I think what you're seeing now is there are members that are trying to harness that same populist feel, and that populist feel doesn't always match up with maybe the stated position of a corporation, right? And you have people that are elected that are saying, I may not care about company X's opinion on it, I care about what their employees think about it, because their employees are my voters. And so you've kind of had this internal split of, I still care about the interest, but I'm looking at it through the lens of their workforce rather than from the the C-suite. And I do think that has emerged quite a bit in the past couple of years.
Yeah, and we certainly saw it on vaccine issues. Another good example where there was division. And some of those large corporations really were very happy with mandates, vaccine mandates, because it allowed their companies to reopen and thrive.
Yeah, business. We ought to have some numbers coming in fairly soon.
We've got some Pulaski County early vote numbers that are
all right.
And nothing really surprising in these numbers in any of the statewide races. I think maybe the most interesting thing is the lieutenant governor's race, where we were just leaving off, and in that race, Attorney General Rutledge is just short of 50% in Pulaski County. What's particularly interesting is that Dr. Bledsoe is in a strong second spot position in Pulaski County. Obviously, a very big county, not as important in the Republican primary as it is in the Democratic side, but still often gives some trends of where where things are headed.
Yeah, should that hold in, again, emphasizing that we're talking here just about Pulaski County, is it a terrible surprise to see Mr. Bledsoe, Dr. Bledsoe in second?
You know, he's got Benton County roots. I mean, he lives and works in Pulaski County, so he almost gets to double dip on what's home, right? So I think that's an advantage for him there.
Yeah.
John Bozeman also at 59% in the Pulaski County early numbers, so that's a strong start for him.
And both of the gubernatorial candidates that we talked about earlier, the Chris Jones and Sarah Huckabee Sanders, in very, very, very strong shape in Pulaski County.
Yeah.
And Dr. Bledsoe had a pretty strong media buy here in Pulaski County, so I'm sure that helps as well with his numbers here.
A lot on the air in the last several days. Going to go to the Red and White Event Center, the Red and Blue Event Center, where we have the Vice Chair of the Democratic State Committee standing by, Nicole Hart. I hope, Ms. Hart, that you are with us now, that you can hear me okay. Good.
I can. Thank you.
Terrific.
Glad to be here.
All right. Is this a red? You're dressed in an appropriate color for the party, anyway.
Of course. That was intentional.
Well, all right. How blue can you make this year?
Well, you know, I think that blue represents for a lot of us hope and really pushing forth a message of unity, trying to bring the message back to the people. And so we're thinking that we're going to not necessarily turn the state blue again, but you're going to see a lot of blue in the place come after these election results come in. Because I think...
No, please go ahead.
I just think that you'll see a lot. It's okay. I just think that a lot of people are excited and have a different level of energy about, especially for certain races with our Democratic primary, and wanting to have their voices heard, so they have their representative facing the Republican candidates going into the general election.
All right, in certain races, certain places, you say, what are the priorities for the party this year?
We have a couple of races that we'll be looking at. Obviously, our governor's race has brought some national attention with Sarah Huckabee Sanders kind of being the presumed nominee for the Republican Party. So we've had a lot of national attention, a lot of local attention, and a lot of energy just because our candidates represent a different group of population of people that we hadn't seen before and just have outstanding backgrounds. I think our Secretary of State's race, when we look at vulnerabilities in offices and what some of our statewide candidates have been able to do or not do, we definitely see areas of vulnerability. So I definitely see that Secretary of State's office race being one that we'll all be paying attention to. And then some of our local House seats will definitely be, and even our JP seats, we have a lot of interest in some of the Justice of the Peace. So we'll see some shifts there on the quorum court as we move into the general election. So we have a lot of things that we've picked out.
Vulnerability is your term. Vulnerable. What? Vulnerable how? On what basis?
Well, so I would say it's definitely for our Secretary of State's race. We know that with this last legislative session and even previous to that, we saw a lot of issues where voters felt like their rights were attacked, that there was a lot of national trends that were trying to be brought down to our local races or to our state in particular, and people weren't really happy about that. So a lot of conversations that we've heard amongst the people in the community from our county committees and just voters in general have been just very decisive about trying to make sure that voting rights are protected. And we know that that Secretary of State position is critical to ensuring that voting rights are protected for all Arkansans. So I definitely think that that's a race. And I feel like that Secretary of State's, because of what happened during our legislative session and some of the laws that were pushed through, were a little bit extreme. And because of that extremism, we saw a lot of people upset and willing to get to the polls to change and shift that narrative about what we're talking about during that legislative session.
Economic issues are quite often at the very forefront of elections, or almost every election for that matter. And the tide would seem to be flowing in the GOP's favor anyway, in terms of the country's economic travails right at the moment. How do you counter that?
Well, I think one of the things that we have focused on related to, I think, growth and infrastructure development. We see that the president has done some significant things with the stimulus and with the infrastructure development dollars that have come down to our state. A lot of our rural parts of the state and citizens are really benefiting from that, and we've had positive receptivity about those dollars coming into the state. So you see a lot of people not necessarily talking about how much money Republicans can bring in or how much money that they're crying about at the national level that our presidential administration is pushing out, but really what it looks like in their home, at their dinner tables, and what it looks like in their pockets. And so I think that's the area that we'll be focused on, is really focusing on Arkansans at the grassroots level, what's happening in their homes, what's happening in their schools. And that's not a national conversation. That's a conversation that you have in the southern part of our state, in the Delta, to the farthest northern part of our state, even in the central part of our state. And so we'll continue to have that conversation, not bringing it to national attention and national focuses, but really looking at how is it affecting every household here in Arkansas, and what are their voices saying about what's needed and how they really feel about money and where it's helping them.
Well, it isn't true only of Arkansas, but it's true especially of Arkansas. It's true for much of the South and the Midwest, and that's the rural electorate. And the GOP would, in the last several elections, has plainly had a lock on that vote. How do you propose to unlock it? What's the key?
Well, as we've been in our what we call war room, kind of mapping out that rural vote conversation, it's really been about, again, that grassroots effort, talking to the people. I think that we've seen a lot of fear politics kind of moving into this election and trying to get people scared about ideas that aren't really even affecting the people in our state. So educating them about the facts, what's actually going to happen here in our state and how it's going to affect them. I think counteracting I guess they call it fake news or the fear mongering that they're trying to put into Arkansans about some of the things that you see coming out, just giving them facts about what the truth of the matter is and not speaking to some national narrative that continues to come down. And so that's the things that we've talked about, how we push out those messages. Is it better through social media? Is it better through door knocking? Really focusing on our organizers and how we strategize around our coordinated campaign for every candidate so that we can touch every person in a special way that really gets to hear them, but then also lets them hear our message about what we're trying to accomplish this election. One of the things that we're also going to focus on is helping people understand that we won't be able to flip it blue this whole time. And I think when we present realistic expectations, it's more believable and people trust us at a different level because we're not pushing falsehoods about an idea, but we're pushing realities about what we see the possibilities are and going after those specific things so that we truly see victory in November and what victory looks like for us as the Democratic Party.
Well, you're suggesting, though, that the progress of rebuilding the Democratic Party in Arkansas is going to be incremental, which I think most people would tend to agree with. Where do you see the gains coming? At the local level, at the General Assembly, or?
I didn't hear that last part. Where do I see the what coming?
Where do you see the gains coming? If you're going to make incremental progress, where should observers look to see it?
I think it's going to be a lot at the local races. We have about 6 House races. Our main idea is to break that supermajority. I think the Democrats in the legislative session have not been able to do as much as people feel like we should, because at the end of the day, Republicans had the supermajority. So our ability to really shift the conversation or make things happen was almost impossible at times, it seems. And so for us, it's really going to be focused on breaking that supermajority in the House and focusing on those races that we know will allow us to be able to do that. And then looking at possibly electing a statewide office to show folks that it is possible, because I think a lot of people had lost hope in our ability to really elect a statewide candidate because you saw such a significant shift in the voting pattern here in the state. But I think that if we look at some of these races where we have a possibility to do that, Lane Commissioner, Secretary of State, possibly even the Treasurer. So once we do that, I think it'll offer some forms of hope for those people. So there's, again, breaking that supermajority with 6 specific races, and then looking at how we can possibly get a statewide person in office.
Nicole Hart, Vice Chair of the Democratic State Committee, thanks very much for being with us. We hope to come back to you a little bit later in the evening. Thanks for being with us.
Oh, I'm definitely looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
We had mentioned at the top of the broadcast that there's some very spirited legislative races, and we're going to look at one of them in just a moment. We'll be right back.
For decades, we've been exploring the state, hiking the trails, floating the rivers, and meeting the great people of Arkansas together. We have shared the untold stories of our great state and have brought the world home to you through the most trusted American institution, PBS.
We welcome you, current viewers, new audiences, and new voices to connect with us, public media in Arkansas, whenever and however you choose.
We will uncover even more stories about the natural state. We will illuminate the people behind the scenes, and we will feed your curiosity about your home and your neighbors.
Come with us as we continue to educate, entertain, and uncover fresh local stories for Arkansans of all ages.
Thank you for bringing us into your homes, and we hope we will continue to honor your trust.
Stream the best of PBS on any device with the PBS Video app. All your favorite drama, history, science, news, and documentaries, all in one place. Watch your PBS station live or catch up on the shows you missed. Support your PBS station and you can get Passport, giving you full seasons, early releases, special collections, and more.
Download the PBS Video app or watch online.
When it comes to news and current events in Arkansas, we keep you informed with Arkansas Week each Friday and Sunday. But what about the rest of the week? Get insights, exclusive previews of our upcoming episodes, and much more by signing up for our public affairs newsletter. Don't miss a thing. Sign up at myarpbs.org/signup and get updates you won't find anywhere else right to your inbox.
It's time to rise and shine with Arkansas PBS. For 6 weeks, Arkansas teachers will bring you engaging lessons paired with many of your favorite PBS programs for K-5 students, delivered right to your television or streaming device. Help jumpstart your kids' learning this summer with Rise and Shine starting July 5th at 8:30 a.m. Visit myarpbs.org/rise and shine for ways to watch and to download free in-depth learning activities.
Working the land can leave you with a sense of fulfillment, but it can also be the cause of great mental, physical, and even financial stress. In 2010, the agriculture industry had the highest rate of suicide of any occupation. How are the farmers and ranchers doing now, and how can we change those statistics? We want to hear from you. Share your questions with Arkansas PBS through our social media channels using the hashtag GrowingHopeAR. Email us at paffairs@myarkansaspbs.org or leave a voicemail at 501-682-0318. I'm Lauren McCullough. Join me as I host a discussion on stress in the agriculture industry and let our panel of experts answer your questions. Thursday night at 7.
And we are back, and Marty Rowell, we had talked, as mentioned at the top of the broadcast, about some of the incumbents being challenged, intra-party challenges, and there's one in particular right now that we've got some early numbers on.
Well, there is. Senator Bill Sample over in Garland County, it's Senate District 6, and I don't know if I got the map right there, but his district, you know, with redistricting, we talked about this, that in 2018 there were around 25 legislative races that had primary contests. In 2020 you had about the same numbers, 25. This year there are 62.
More than double.
And it's because of redistricting, because areas are taken out, and you lose a lot of the power of incumbency because you have new constituents and you're lesser known and that kind of thing. And so Senator Sample, who's been in the Senate since 2010, the early numbers on that, and I guess our early votes show that he's got a 1-vote lead over Bill McKee, Matt McKee. Matt McKee he's a justice of peace over there. He's the Garland County chairman of the Republican Party. That district is almost our Garland County. The redistricting took out a part of, it had some population in Saline County. They took that out. It's still got part of Saline County in there, but it's not much population in it. So most of all the population now is Garland County. And so Senator Sample's been there quite a while, is well known, but he's got a strong candidate who's worked hard, who's given him a race. And so that's going to be one we're watching tonight. And you can see right now with the early vote, it's 1 vote is separating those two.
Yeah.
Nothing any closer than that.
What's driving that? Do you know? Do we know?
I think it's hard to say. It's I don't know if Robert's got an idea of what's been some of the issues over there or not. I don't know.
Well, there were certainly some factions in the state Senate this past session. I think that's probably part of it. I think Sample was with one group, and there's anytime the party grows, right, the group starts to split. That's what we're here talking about.
Yeah.
The Democrats have been through that when there was only one Republican running for everything, and the Democrats had the competition on their side. I think you see that inside the chamber too, inside the Senate. I think Senator Sample has taken some tough votes that leadership has that he's been a part of. I think that has, kind of created some issues, for him politically. Not that they were the wrong vote, but I think sometimes you take the hard vote and it might bring you a challenger. And I think he took some of those votes, and I suspect that's kind of where this has come from.
Sometimes these intra-party, intra-chamber rivalries or conflicts anyway over policies, ideology are subsurface. And sometimes they're not. And in the last 2-3 sessions, they've been pretty visible. And in fact, the incoming pro tem in the Senate, Mr. Hester, openly acknowledged, there's no point really in denying, because anybody who watched the Senate could see that there was some real friction in that chamber.
And Steve, you really think about the whole history of the state. And this state its politics have all been about factions within a single party. We've basically had single party dominance, back to 1836, but we've had these deep divisions within the party, whichever one was in charge at that given point in time. And the Republicans probably had a cycle or two where things were pretty peaceful, but now as the dominance has grown, it's now that division, and it really
there's literally room for disagreement now.
Yeah, there is, and that's natural, and you do have money on both sides of that, which is obviously very important in this, and you have constituencies that have that are active in the party on both sides of that, and so we're going to start to see more division when it comes to leadership of the state party, things like that are going to become the norm for the period of time that we really have this kind of dominance, however long it is.
Yeah. Waiting more numbers to come in, but very quickly we can take a look at the race for Attorney General. As noted, the incumbent, Marty, is term limited. Ms. Rutledge has to move on, and she's trying to become Lieutenant Governor. But that opens the AG's office.
Well, it does, and of course, Tim Griffin, who's well known in Arkansas politics, he served in Congress for a few terms, and
a couple, I think.
Yeah, and then has served as Lieutenant Governor, and he flirted with the idea of running for governor.
Like Ms. Rutledge, he wanted to be governor, and
but
wasn't a year.
Right, he's got an attorney, he's got a legal background, and so he's running for Attorney General, and he's, as we see, he's got a very strong lead. Lieutenant Governor Griffin's very good at raising funds, and so he had a big money advantage there, and he's already known statewide, and he's a strong candidate, so that's not a surprise. He's going to cruise tonight.
He's a political tactician. He knows what he's doing, and I will say, Jay touched earlier about how there've been lieutenant governors that have been kind of hands off and ceremonial. Tim Griffin is not that lieutenant governor. Tim Griffin showed up in the Senate chamber almost daily to conduct the business of the Senate, and did it with pride and energy, and I mean, I think he's probably
verve.
Well, and authority, and I think he's probably better for it because I mean he knows how it works, and if at some point he becomes governor, he knows how the sausage.
Well, and he is a statistician that I mean he served with Karl Rove in the White House, so I mean he learned a little bit there, I'm sure.
Yeah. The interesting thing, of course, the man he's meeting tonight is the brother of Chris Jones, the Democrat who's running for governor. So, an interesting story there. This has to be a little bit of a, I'm sure they're very happy to be in the position they're in their races for Attorney General Rutledge and Lieutenant Governor Griffin, but they certainly wanted to be in a different spot tonight. I mean, they wanted to be in that governor's race. They tried hard, but once the huge power that Sarah Huckabee Sanders was in that party came into that race, those dreams went away. Tim Griffin realized it more quickly than Leslie Rutledge, who hung on and tried to give it a run, but couldn't get there in the end.
I wouldn't say they went away. I would say they were delayed a little bit.
Yeah. Well said.
Yeah, I don't think tonight will end automatically several political careers anyway, those who are seeking district or statewide office anyway. We mentioned, or the Democratic State Chair mentioned, Vice Chair Ms. Hart mentioned a moment ago that not just in Arkansas but across the country there is a renewed focus, guys, on the office of Secretary of State, particularly following the last presidential election. And we have an incumbent under challenge, Jay.
Yeah, John Thurston's been the Secretary of State. He's been a fairly mild-mannered Secretary of State compared with some of the Secretaries of State in other states that have been more aggressive on issues of ballot access and other legislation that might limit access to the polls. But he has been a fairly chill Secretary of State. I think that kind of rubbed some folks in the Republican Party who wanted a more assertive and aggressive Secretary of State the wrong way. And so Eddie Joe Williams, a former legislator and former Trump administration official, came into the race and tried to play that role. We'll see where it goes. I mean, I think that we're seeing some very preliminary numbers here. Thurston in pretty good shape at this point, but these are very, very early numbers. But I do think that Thurston will be still at the center, I think, of conversations in this next legislative session, because these issues of voting processes and legislation about them aren't going away in the near future.
Yeah, and Robert Kuhn wanted Mr. Thurston to emphasize time and again is, look, we had a good, smooth, clean election here.
Right. I mean, you saw a few things.
Of course, the favorite candidate won handily,
well,
so
yeah,
there wasn't
that's
any
right.
controversy about that.
I think people, when there's an incumbent on the ballot, I think you have to demonstrate why that incumbent should be defeated. Right? I mean, you have to be able to articulate what they've done wrong. I don't feel like that case was made in John Thurston's race in the primary. I think it's going to be very challenging for someone to do that, in the general election. I don't think there's some groundswell of opposition there. I think Democrats are looking, they know they can't win the governor's office. They're trying to figure out, can we find some statewide race to try to get to? I think if you talk about voting, it's obviously a passionate issue. That's going to excite Democratic voters much more than talking about the treasurer's race or the auditor's race or the land commissioner's race. You can get people engaged to talk about voting. I think that's why they're centering on Secretary of State. It's the logical place for them to fall. I think it's going to be a challenge because I don't think there are glaring issues that someone can pick at there. Yeah. So I mean, I think that's why they're doing what they're doing.
Okay, Democratic primary there's a challenger, or will be a challenger. There's two candidates, I think.
And two pretty high quality challengers. Josh Price has been the election commissioner in Pulaski County. Pulaski County, obviously, a place where there was a lot of intensity after the election, even because of some overtime elections. And then Annabeth Gorman, who's a nonprofit executive, who has I think very strong support, especially in some of the corporate community because of her role in that in the Women's Foundation of Arkansas. These are two good candidates. I think there was some frustration within the Democratic Party that you had two candidates running in a race against each other when there were lots of other open races out there in a party that's trying to rebuild itself.
And only so much money,
and
too.
only so much energy and money to go around. So I think this is probably going to be the closest race on the statewide ballot for the Democrats, and I think it's not very clear. Josh Price got some support at the end from Jesse Jackson, and that was some high-profile support in the Democratic Party. But I think Annabeth Gorman has a couple of advantages. I think she does have some of that kind of more mainstream support. And I think she also does have, she is a woman in an electorate, the Democratic Party electorate, which we anticipate will be about 57% female, and that is an advantage. There was a little bit of a gender gap shown in this race, the polling that we did, but it showed it to be a very, very, very close race.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to, I suspect anyway, that it's easy for most of us to overlook or to forget, because we put so much focus on U.S. Senate or Congressman or Governor, Attorney General. Secretary of State in any state, but particularly Arkansas, it is one serious job, and it isn't just running an election. It's corporate filings and all manner of administrative law matters that really have to be seen to, or chaos can follow.
Well, it is, and it is. It's one of those jobs that you don't hear a whole lot about. You hear about the election part,
sure.
But you don't hear about the other parts. And it's one of those jobs you don't hear about it until somebody messes up, and then you hear a lot about it. And but to Robert's point, I don't think anybody's seen any issues with that office, and so it's going to be tough to overcome that. If I could, I want to talk about another race we're watching tonight. We're starting to get some results in.
Yeah, and this is a good one.
Is Senate District 17, which we sit in Senate District 17, which is in right here in Faulkner County. Part of Pulaski is Spencer Hawks and Mark Johnson. And I got the map up here. I don't know if y'all can show this. I want to show you. This is a perfect example of how redistricting can affect a race and make it somewhat challenging sometimes for an incumbent. Right now it has part of Pulaski and part of Faulkner County, and the old district, it went all the way in and took over part of Maumelle and went all the way up to Marlton and took in Marlton. But here we go. So if you look at this map, the old district took in Maumelle, right here, and then it went all the way up, and it goes off this map. It went into Marlton, but they took all that out. And the Pulaski County is here, but it's not a big population base. It went into Faulkner County and took up Conway, and that Conway is a new part for Senator Johnson. He's got some ties here. He went to school there and that kind of thing. But that's Spencer Hawks' base, where he was a justice of the peace and his home for his family, and that is probably 75% of the population base is in Conway, and so it's been the most expensive Senate race, state Senate race out there. The close to $250,000 spent between the two of them, and so it's expected to be a close race. And it's two good candidates that have worked hard, but it just shows you that how redistricting can take what looks like a safe seat for an incumbent and bring in a whole new constituency that may not know you as well, but they know somebody else well, and make it an uphill battle for you or a challenge for you. And I think that's what we're seeing here.
We will be looking at some other legislative races in which redistricting made a significant difference in the demographics of that district, the geopolitics of that district, but probably none are, maybe a couple are at least as dramatic as that one, but few others are.
Yeah, there are.
In terms of shifting from mostly, fair to say, mostly rural to urban.
Right, and this one did, and there are certainly some others that we want to look at tonight that have some incumbents that are facing a challenge. Another race we want to watch tonight, and I don't know that we have any numbers in on it, is Senate District 22, where we have this is it up here, where you have Senator Sturch he's from Independence County. That's Batesville, which is the big county in the center there. But he's being challenged by State Representative John Payton, and then he's from Cleveland County, which is it's a smaller population base of the county. And then you have Ethan Barnes. We do have some results there. Ethan Barnes is from Sharp County, which he's fairly well known, involved in politics up there, so this is going to be one to watch to see if a lot of speculation might be a runoff up there, but you got, like I said, you got an incumbent state senator and a state representative up there that is going to be an interesting race, and that district shifted a little bit. It's not as dramatic as a lot of others. Senator Sturge still has a lot of his old district in there, so he wouldn't hurt as much as some others. He got a little bit more Lawrence County in the district this time, and I think he lost a little bit of Fulton County up there, but for the most part, I think he fared fairly well in his redistricting.
Yeah, and again, we have in the case of Mr. Sturge anyway, he's generally viewed as the more moderate of those three candidates.
Yeah, I think both these races have that factionalism that we were discussing just a bit ago at work. I think in that district, the Sturge district, we do need to be really wary of returns there because geography is going to be so important, as Marty was suggesting. And so if we see an early result, if it's all from one county, that may be something to be a little wary of till we get a little later in the evening.
It looks like the numbers that we have right now are from Independence, and he's Sturge is ahead there, which he would have to be.
That's going to be his best
and that's been in his previous race against Linda Collins Smith. He obviously ran really strong on Independence, and she kind of did better around the outer counties surrounding Independence. I think that's with Barnes being from Sharp County and Payton being from Cleveland County, they're kind of having to split. It'd be a little bit different if there was just one person running around outside Independence, but whether that split costs the runoff, I don't know. That'll be interesting because no one can grab all of the outlier counties.
Yeah, and then if it does go to a runoff, then all bets are off. It's a whole new ballgame at that point. So it'll be interesting to watch. And I want to talk about one other Senate race that we're watching closely tonight, and that is Senate District 28, which is up in northwest Arkansas. That is right here. But it is Senator Bob Ballinger is the incumbent in that race, and he's from down here in Johnson County. And this is a 5-candidate race, and a lot of interesting dynamics here. You've got Brian King, who is from up here in Carroll County, and that's a big chunk of the district. And Brian King was a state senator up there. And Bob Ballinger was a state representative who knocked him off last time, so 4 years ago. So this is kind of a rematch between those two. But then you got some other players that have come in. One is Representative Keith Schlapp. He's from Newton County, which is not a big part, a small population part of the district, but he's got some family and I understand some ties up in Boone County. Boone County is new to this district, and it's one of the stronger population bases in the county. Boone and Carroll are both, between the two of them, they both got like 28,000 each in the population. But you got another candidate from Boone who's the CEO of the area chamber up there, and Bob Largent is the one from Boone County, and then there's a fifth candidate, Ted Walker, who's over in Madison County. So, but I think everybody kind of feels like that the race tonight is to see, Bob Ballinger, Brian King, and probably Representative Schlapp. Two of those three are going to be in a runoff, and who knows what happens. Could be a rematch between Ballinger and King, which it got pretty pretty heated last time. I see Jay nodding over there. You look like you remember that.
It's gotten even more personal since then. I mean, they've clearly kind of grown further apart, Brian King.
They're not fishing buddies.
No, not at all.
We're dancing around. These two guys just plain don't.
They don't like each other. No, they do
not. And Brian King has had some good fundraising success. He went into this race with some money, and I think some of that is Bob Ballinger is somebody who has some enemies across the state. He's kind of a lot of more moderate and even progressive folks really identify him as one of the more problematic members in the state Senate.
Which he probably wears as a badge of honor.
Like a medal.
Indeed.
That's right.
So this is everything. It's geography. It's factionalism. It's personal. It's good old politics.
But to an extent also it's ideological, because
Yes.
this is exactly what we've been talking about all evening long. You have a Chamber of Commerce executive in there as the more moderate of those five.
Yeah, Brian King fits he's in his own orbit in a lot of ways. He doesn't fit neatly in.
I think we call those mavericks, right?
Yes,
Is that what you call them?
and he's got a personality that is quite maverick-like as well, and he's got some interesting fans.
Yeah.
Some of the more progressive folks in the state. Max Brantley from the Arkansas Times, a big fan of Brian King's, and so this has been a fascinating race. And if you've driven up in that part of the state, it is an absolute sign war. Throughout the prettiest part of the state, it's just littered with signs.
And it looked like those numbers that we're in so far were from Boone County. So those are the Boone County numbers. You've got Keith Slape leading the ballot in Boone County, which is not his home county. So interesting. He's, that's early vote, one county, but if he can grab some in a county that maybe he wasn't supposed to perform higher in, maybe he can find a way into the runoff. I don't know, but there would be some optimism.
Well, it's interesting. You were talking about conduit for action earlier, and Brian King is their candidate in this race. They're backing him over Ballinger in this race, and again, it'll. But anyway, that's another one. It's an expensive race between those two, and it's going to be one to watch as this develops tonight.
We aren't going to make any projections here. Well, we may. I don't know. We'll wait and see. But we can pass along one. CNN, hold on to your seats. CNN has projected that Sarah Huckabee Sanders will be the Republican nominee for governor of the state of Arkansas. CNN really going out on a limb there, but it's early and things could change, but CNN is calling it for Ms. Sanders. So we passed that along.
The irony is CNN got special attack from Sarah Huckabee Sanders in one of her campaign ads, so I'm sure she's
a little touch of irony in all of
indeed,
that. Yeah,
indeed.
She may not recognize it until somebody else calls it.
All right, Josh Prime. We were talking a second ago about the campaign for Secretary of State. And there is a Democratic primary, and one of those candidates, Josh Price, is with us now, I think at the Red and Blue Event Center. Mr. Price, are you with us? Okay,
he's with us.
Ronak Patel is.
Hello, so I'm Ronak Patel, and I'm here with Josh Price. Josh, with polling closing, how do you feel about the election?
Well, I feel good. I was the election commissioner in Pulaski County, so I know that it's definitely not over till all the numbers come in, but I feel really good. We've gone to 56 counties in the state. We've met voters where they are, talked to communities that a lot of people don't talk to, minority communities, rural communities. So I feel confident that the voters are going to come out.
Polling shows that you and Annabeth Gorman are just 1 point apart, and undecided voters will decide this election. Why do you think those voters are still undecided between you two, and how do you reach out to them and get their vote?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we've been doing a lot of boots on the ground voter engagement, in-person voter engagement. We did run some TV ads over the weekend as well, so we'll see what happens. Hopefully it'll reach all those voters that were undecided.
So Ms. Gorman is a newcomer to the Democratic Party. Are you surprised that she's kind of gotten so much ground on you?
Maybe a little bit, but the Democratic Party is the party of inclusion, and it's always important to bring new folks into the fold and be a welcoming party.
Thank you, Mr. Price. Yeah. Steve, back to you.
We're going to run some other legislative races here now, if we can, if we've got some numbers coming in. Marty?
Thanks, Josh.
Thank you.
You're my first
well, I'm just looking at yeah. Looking for some that we can call. Do you have any over there? I don't have any.
They're slow coming in.
Not altogether unexpected, because some of these district races, legislative races, are going to be, and we want to be careful too in what we report. But it'll be some time before we get anything resembling authoritative.
I will say
numbers.
Senator John Bozeman continues to keep his chin above 50%. He's currently with roughly 69,000 votes in on the Secretary of State side. He's at 57%. So if that if that holds, it's certainly a great start for the night for his team.
Yeah, and we haven't talked about Mr. Bozeman's race so far this evening. We were going to run through the state constitutional officers first, but I think given some numbers coming in that Senate race, it's time to take a look at that. And that was a 4-person primary with 2 fairly well-known names anyway because of past experience, and then a couple who came in. So a 4-person primary, Jay.
Yeah, and I think that Jake Beckett, who did have a lot of national money, who came into the race on his side, and Jan Morgan, while they spent a lot of time kind of bickering with each other because I think they knew that they were fighting to be the kind of leading opponent to Senator Bozeman, and I think they spent some money and spent some energy on that. I think if there had been a kind of a single candidate against Senator Bozeman, I think that could have been a dynamic that could have put him in a little bit more challenged position, but he always had that opposition divided, and I think that was helpful. Obviously, it was also helpful that he had millions of dollars and endorsements from some big names on the Republican side, including right at the end, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who had run his first campaign for the U.S. Senate, came in and offered her support as well, and I think that certainly helped at the end.
I don't know how much the multi-candidate really plays. I'm not convinced it would have mattered. I feel like if you go back historically and look at previous statewide campaigns where you kind of have a non-incumbent or a challenger from the right, we talked about factionalism earlier. Curtis Coleman ran against Senator Bozeman 6 years ago and got 27%, I think. You had Jan Morgan run against Asa Hutchinson and get roughly 30%. There is a solid 26, 30, maybe 35. Right now it's looking like maybe 40% that's willing to vote for that challenger against your established candidate or your incumbent. People have kind of been asking, is that going to go to a runoff? It's hard for me to see that group combine enough to get to 50 to 51. I just don't think it's quite there yet. It doesn't mean it won't ever be, but it's grown from 26 to 30 to maybe, we'll see. I don't think Beckett is all of that. I think Jan's group is pretty solid. Beckett's is maybe a combination of a lot of TV dollars promoting him plus some of that group.
Well, that's what I was going to say. The difference there is that Jan Morgan didn't have the money behind her, and so you had that 30% that was just going to be against the governor. Whoever else was in that spot is going to get that 30%. I mean, you could have put, you put Marty Ryle's name out there and probably got that. Well, maybe not, maybe 28, but I don't know. But the added money that Jake Beckett, he's got his benefactor who's got the independent expenditure out there that is running probably. Put more money in than his campaign has on ads, and so that's significant amount of money. If it only boosted up 5%, then that's not a lot for that amount of money.
Yeah. And 4 years ago when she opposed Mr. Hutchinson in the Republican gubernatorial primary, the question was how much resentment there was, or whether Mr. Hutchinson had, to what extent he had, as a comparative moderate, to what extent he had had run against the populist strain that was even then in vogue in GOP circles, and the answer was not too much.
Well, although I think there was always, in that race, it was a fascinating race, because I think if President Trump had gotten engaged in that race, it could have made a big difference, and he never did. He held back on Governor Hutchinson, and that I think kept her support limited in a way. If she had gotten an amplification from the president, that would have been a very, very different race.
Yeah, and the irony kind of there was this is Mr. Hutchinson and Mr. Trump, even at that point, had been at odds on policy matters almost from the beginning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, one we haven't talked about is the state treasurer's race.
Let's go.
And the numbers are starting to come in, and State Representative Mark Lowry, who is running against State Senator Matthew Pitts from over in Fort Smith. Mark Lowry's here in Pulaski, or not here in Pulaski, in Pulaski County from Maumelle. But the numbers, of course, I don't see what Robert may have where these numbers are coming from, but it looks like 45,000 to 18,000. That's a pretty significant lead out of 63,000 votes cast, and that's kind of been a low-key race. It's one of those that's kind of been under the radar. That neither one of them had any TV ads. I think it's been more of a, get in your car and a grassroots campaign, and they might have had. I think they both had a little bit of money to put in the mail, which. When you don't have that much money, and Robert touched on this earlier, you hit the high propensity primary voters, the ones that always go out and vote, the 4, the 4, the 3, the 4, whatever it may be. But when you have a bigger turnout, then you're not hitting some of those. And so it's interesting that there's that big of a lead for the two candidates that looked a little more evenly matched when you just looked at the race.
Mr. Pitch, Senator Pitch, was a bit more aggressive anyway in terms of capturing headlines than Mr. Lowry was than Senator Pitch. Yeah. Mr. Lowry, you recall, made much of critical race theory anyway in the last session.
Yeah, I mean, he had a series of pieces of legislation on that issue, and then he had a whole flurry of election-oriented bills, and he, of course,
voter ID was one of his, I think.
Indeed, and it was a huge bill that had a lot of different pieces, a couple of which became law. He, I think, used that very well to get statewide name recognition. He obviously initially wanted to be a Secretary of State candidate. He got in that race and then pulled back and moved over to the Treasurer's race, and it was a good move for him, I think, as it indicates. We showed, our last poll showed good support for Lowry. I think there was some surprise. That was one of the more surprising results that we had, but because it felt like a more closely matched race in all regards. But it clearly appears not to have been, and he will have an opponent in the fall. But again, the Republican brand is going to be a pretty powerful, and even for a candidate who was somewhat controversial.
Yeah, Robert.
Yeah, ironically, after the polling we did, I think the first question I got from most people when people would just, see me somewhere or give me a call was, is Bozeman going to win without a runoff? And the second one was, what's up with the Treasurer's race? I mean, that was the second thing people would ask. It just surprised folks to, see the disparity was there, because a lot of the incumbent races that we polled, the incumbent in most cases was ahead. This was one where, state house, state senator, no one's the incumbent. They both have titles. What gives? And our polling showed Lowry up significantly. It was hard for me to really explain. I think Marty's question about where were dollars spent, I think that's part of it. I completely agree that Lowry is a more high-profile, engaged in hot-button issues than Matt Pitch. I think that's probably played into it too. So, there's a lot of votes still out there. I was looking to see Sebastian County's not in, but I mean the lead is mounting a little bit there. It's not something you could call, but there's a widening there, and so Matt's going to need to make up some margins to, as we move on in the night.
Yeah, got some distance to cover. But one of the interesting things, and again, it is early, quite early. But Marty, bedeviling Mr. Lowry almost from the start of the campaign were his personal financial troubles over the past decade or so.
Yeah, there
serial bankrupt, two or three bankruptcies.
There were Arkansas Democrat Gazette ran an article that talked about some financial history there he had answers to. He said he had some financial trouble, but from what I've seen, it wasn't made an issue in the campaign, and so if you don't follow. Most people don't follow politics like we do. I mean, they're out there taking their kids to soccer games and doing all the things that the families do. They're not
glued.
They're not glued to well, they should be glued to Arkansas Week, but not all of them are. Unless you run a campaign and get a message out and talk about some of these things, the average voter is not going to know about them.
Yeah, no indication at this early hour anyway that resonated at all, guys.
Well, I mean, I was just while you were talking, I was pulling up the Pulaski County early vote just because I was kind of curious as people are even going down to some of these races where they're just not checked in. They know who Sarah Huckabee Sanders is, they know who John Bozeman is. Right. In Pulaski County, there was 841 of the 10,000 that voted skipped it. So what you may be seeing, and we had high undecideds in a lot of the stuff that we polled, and that was also puzzling, was, there's still these large chunks, and they say they're going to vote, right? I mean, we screen them to make sure that they're very likely to vote, and they say they are. doesn't mean they're going to vote in every race. And I think what we're seeing is, I mean,
of
the early numbers, that was almost 8% of the folks that cast a ballot in Pulaski County early vote didn't pick anybody in that race. So that's going to play into it too. So if you do have a base and people start skipping it, it just kind of going to grow the gap a little bit.
Right. Overvote, undervote.
That's right.
We'll be right back. We're going to take a quick break. Stay with us. For almost 4 decades, Arkansas Week's been keeping you informed of the news and issues that matter most, featuring the newsmakers, the experts, the analysts, the journalists, the thought leaders who shape life and news and opinion in Arkansas. So join us as we continue to provide in-depth conversation, in-depth coverage from our new, modern, state-of-the-art studio home, where we'll cover the news as never before. So stay connected to the pulse of Arkansas with Arkansas Week.
Stream the best of PBS on any device with the PBS Video app. All your favorite drama, history, science, news, and documentaries, all in one place. Watch your PBS station live or catch up on the shows you missed. Support your PBS station and you can get Passport, giving you full seasons, early releases, special collections, and more.
Download the PBS Video app or watch online.
It's time to rise and shine with Arkansas PBS. For 6 weeks, Arkansas teachers will bring you engaging lessons paired with many of your favorite PBS programs for K-5 students, delivered right to your television or streaming device. Help jumpstart your kids' learning this summer with Rise and Shine, starting July 5th at 8:30 a.m. Visit myarpbs.org/rise and shine for ways to watch and to download free in-depth learning activities.
Working the land can leave you with a sense of fulfillment, but it can also be the cause of great mental, physical, and even financial stress. In 2010, the agriculture industry had the highest rate of suicide of any occupation. How are the farmers and ranchers doing now, and how can we change those statistics? We want to hear from you. Share your questions with Arkansas PBS through our social media channels using the hashtag GrowingHopeAR. Email us at pfairs@myarkansapbs.org or leave a voicemail at 501-682-0318. I'm Lauren McCullough. Join me as I host a discussion on stress in the agriculture industry and let our panel of experts answer your questions. Thursday night at 7.
And we are back. There are some early indications anyway, that the presumptive Republican gubernatorial nominee is preparing to address the party faithful at the GOP Event Center. So we are going to go to our Christina Munoz.
And I think it's gonna be and I think it's gonna be a long, long time. And I think it's gonna be
As we mentioned a bit, we're going to go to Christina Munoz here in just a moment, but the image that you're seeing now is at the Republican State Event Center. It's at the Embassy Suites in West Little Rock. As we mentioned a few minutes ago, CNN has projected that Ms. Sanders will be, in fact, the Republican gubernatorial nomination. There's really absolutely zero suspense regarding that since the campaign began. In fact, since she returned to Arkansas from Washington, it was widely assumed that she had politics. Well, everyone knows she had it in her blood anyway, but it was widely assumed that she would put her name on the ballot in one capacity. Now, then the governor's race appeared the most likely.
And as we're all sitting here looking at results, not paying attention, I was looking at. I'm sorry, Steve. I was looking at some of these. Some of the Benton County numbers looks like are coming in, and State Senate District 32, which is Representative Joshua Bryant's running for an open seat up there against Jim Tull, who's a well-known businessman. Fair amount of money spent up there in that race, but Representative Bryant's got a looks like a 2-to-1 lead up there in the early returns. Then again in Benton County Senate District 34, where you have State Representative Jim Dotson, who is running against the mayor of Bella Vista, Peter Christie, and he's got over a 2-to-1 margin there in the early returns, 3,100 votes or so, about 1,500 votes. And then another race up in Benton County, which is State Representative Gayla McKenzie, which is of the Hendren family. Tyler Dees is leading in that race, and just lost it there. But yeah, Tyler Dees is leading in that race, and she's running second. That potentially could be headed to a runoff. Jeff Tennett's the third person in that race. But you know, that's Jim Hendren's old seat, and you know, the Hendren, it's been Kim Hendren, his dad had it before that, so it's been the Hendren family for a long time, and so that's an interesting race to watch. And then another one up there, I think I just saw some results coming in, is Representative Clint Penzo. Which is up around Springdale, I believe, is where that district is, and he's got a pretty decent lead. It's a 3-person race. Paul Colvin, who is the mayor of Tawnytown. I always mix that up. And then Andrew Thompson, who is pastor of a big Methodist church up there in Springdale, is the other third candidate. And but anyway, Penzo has a pretty early lead there going in. So the Benton County numbers are starting to come in. It'll be interesting to see how those shake out in the some of the statewide races up there, and how those numbers look.
Once upon a time, we would be talking about Benton County and Carroll and Boone as being that's the locus of Republican, and it's still
that'd be all of them.
Now it's statewide, anyway.
Yeah, and especially in the suburbs around Little Rock. I mean, Faulkner County and Saline County, huge Republican counties, as Marty was pointing out earlier. So it really has become a more diverse party. And indeed, you know, I think President Trump had such support in rural areas that there was a kind of an inflation of voting in the in Republican primaries in his elections. The question is how much that gets sustained. I think what is probably going to help sustain it this time is that now you have a lot of local elections, races for sheriff and things like that in a lot of rural counties around the state that are Republican primaries. That's probably going to help boost turnout in those more rural counties where there had been historically almost no Republicanism in this state.
Yeah, just from a pure geographical standpoint, Robert Kuhn, you can't, well, with some exceptions, obviously, like in the Delta and a few other precincts, can't hardly go wrong with putting an R after your name.
That's the brand that you want to put. I mean, you're building, and you're building the farm team of candidates that can continue to kind of climb the ladder. I mean, everybody hates career politicians, but at the same time, people with titles win a lot of the time, so they don't hate them too much, right? But that's the benefit for Republicans, is to get those lower ballot, races and then start building them up.
Sure. Yeah. Marty, got any more numbers?
Well, there are some starting to come in, and we're talking about the Hendren family a minute ago. State Representative District 12, Hope Hendren Duke, which is also the Hendren family, who's running for Gayla McKenzie.
Old seat, yeah.
Old seat.
House seat.
Yeah, and she is, she's on the Gravette School Board up there, and she's running against the president of the Gravette School Board, Jay Oliphant, and then there's a third person in there, Jason Maxwell. So you can see the numbers on the screen, and she's got the early lead, and those are some early votes. But the speculation was that the two Gravette School Board members, and there is some debate over in that race. I think a lot of talk about the mask mandates and all that kind of stuff that went on up there. So that's been an issue in that race up there. But so anyway, that's one to watch. And again, the Hendren family that seat's been there for a long time, and so they're going to be tough.
And of course, it was Senator Hendren who declined to seek renomination this year, seek re-election, and moved away from the Republican Party to independent state, claimed independent status, and is now the CEO, if you will, or the leader of an independent organization, Common Ground Arkansas.
Yeah, and I think the question is what role does that organization play, if any, in the general election? Clearly, that's the place where it would want to, in addition to trying to moderate candidates in the primaries for both parties, but especially the Republicans. We'll see, what kind of role it plays in the general election. And I think that's a to be determined.
Yeah.
Because it was clearly kicked off with a very high-profile announcement by Senator Hendren, and then I think a lot of people have been asking, well, what's it doing? And clearly they've been active, but it's not been as visible as some people anticipated it might be.
Yeah, Robert Kuhn, what's your sense of where this thing can go, Common Ground?
Well, I think it really depends on what their mission is. I mean, I got that question the other day. What would you do if you kind of had their purported mission? Some of their stuff was candidate focused,
which is pragmatism. I mean, problem solving.
Right. I saw something, and I think they don't have a brand that is a household name. So endorsing people and saying they're our person, I don't think that's a strategy, because no one identifies your brand with something that they know and like. So your endorsement doesn't mean much. The answer I gave to that person that asked was, there may be 350,000 people vote in a primary. You're going to have 900,000 people, million people vote in a general election. There are people that are tuned in once a cycle, right? How far of a leap is it to get them to tune in twice a cycle? Especially, and I saw something that Common Ground put out literally either today or yesterday, and it said, the real decisions are being made today, you should vote. And I thought, that's the message I'd be carrying out there. How do you get those 600,000 people difference to care twice a cycle instead of once a cycle? To me, that has to be the mission, not endorsing candidates, get people to care more often. Because they're already invested part of the time, just get them to go to full time. You're not getting them from nothing. I just think that would be their peak effectiveness.
Sure, and as Marty pointed out a second ago, not everybody's weirdos like we are, sitting around looking at, who's on the Gravitt School Board. And if it sounds like we're getting really too granular here with discussions about, who's on the school board or who's running for alderman and wherever, no, we aren't. Because that's where legislation, that's where policy, and that's where politics is shaped at the ultimate, almost family level.
Yeah, and I think the last year has proven that more than ever, right? The battles over mask mandates, the battles over other policies related to COVID-19. I mean, I think that has proven the importance, and we are seeing some. They aren't results we're going to be talking about tonight, but we've seen some, pretty intense school board races around the state, and for many school boards, those elections are on the ballot today, because of the timing. They get some choice about the timing of whether to do it now or if the general election.
That's the great irony of our system, is that everything becomes nationalized, right? I mean, everybody wants to take national issues and inject them into state or local, political races. But the irony is that the most government you're getting in your daily life is either at the state level or at the local level. But that's not what people are tuned into, because they're tuned into Fox News or OAN or whatever they're watching, Arkansas PBS. That's just where they're engaged. But it's not. I mean, that is not at all where they're impacted on a daily basis.
Oh, sure. I'm sorry.
Well, no, I was just going to say, to give you an example of that, I worked this up, that in a state senate district, the population is 86,000, is roughly a state senate district. To take that further, 80% of that is voting age, so that's around 69,000. Then you take it a step lower, 58% in Arkansas statewide are registered to vote. That takes it down to 39,000. And so then the turnout in the primaries in 2018 was 19%. So that means out of that 39,000, 7,500 roughly bothered to turn out to vote. You split those into the parties, and 1/3, which is roughly 2,500 voted Democrat and 5,000 voted Republican. It takes just over half those to select your nominee. So out of that 26,000 in a Republican primary, roughly 2,500 are picking your nominee. So that shows you how few people it takes to actually swing a seat there.
And as a result, shape public policy in the state.
Yeah.
So, yeah. We haven't talked about one set of races which I think are really crucial, and that's the state Supreme Court races that are, and those are actually a couple of the most interesting things I'm seeing right now, is that we've seen two incumbents who have some good leads early. Justice Karen Baker appears to be definitely on her road to re-election to the state Supreme Court. And the perhaps most interesting race is the other one, where Supreme Court Justice Robin Wynn is right right above 50% at that magic point that would prevent a runoff for the fall. We saw very little campaigning by the incumbents in these races. Very interesting. There was a lot more action on the other side. I think early on, Robert was saying, the pattern of Republican turnout would seem to support their opponents who had more deeper ties to the Republican Party. At this point in the evening, we're not seeing that yet. We see the incumbents with that powerful title in front of their names really using that to run very well in those Supreme Court races.
Yeah, and it's not that the incumbent, or particularly Justice Baker, had necessarily hidden past political connections at all. It is that their challengers were so, well, overt.
Overtly, yeah.
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 In their proclamation of past party activity.
But the trick is they may have the Republican background that they want to emphasize. But if you can't get the message out, it doesn't matter. Now I got mail from at least one or two of them, but how many people could they target with a limited budget? It's incredibly hard to run a statewide race with $100,000.
No, it's impossible.
Especially when you've got an incumbent that's on the ballot with a title that is tailored more for the office that you're seeking. I think having judge helps for sure, but because people, we've seen Dan Kemp, right, judge as his title when he won his election to the Supreme Court, but it's just you're just not going to overcome that.
Well, and they also have the added hurdle that a judicial candidate, they can't ask for money. I mean, people can ask for money on their behalf, but as all of you know who've been involved in campaigns, a candidate picking up the phone and calling and asking for money is the biggest asset that they've got. Right. And a judge's candidate can't do that.
Marty, I hate to interrupt, but I think we're going to go to Christina at the Embassy Suites, the Republican celebration there, I think we can call it. Christina.
That is what they were waiting for here before they took the stage. So they have now just announced Sarah Huckabee Sanders to the stage, and as you can imagine, it is a party atmosphere. There's a lot of cheering going on, a lot of signs going up. This is the moment they've all been waiting for here, is to hear from the person they call the next governor of Arkansas. Let's go ahead and join in and listen to Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the newly declared winner of the primary election.
This is absolutely humbling and incredible in so many ways. I didn't think I'd get so emotional this fast. When I worked at the White House, nobody ever cheered when I went up to the podium, so this is different, but I like it a whole lot better. Being a first-time candidate, I've experienced a lot of different things. No problem. I've come to events like this pretty much my entire life, but this is the first time I've ever stood on the stage as the candidate. And I gotta say, I don't hate it. It is such an incredible journey that we have been on for the last year and a half. And the people in this room are the ones that got us here. And it is beyond overwhelming to know so many people from so many places far and wide have come here to be here and celebrate this moment. Like I said, this campaign over the last year and a half has been full of firsts. In fact, not too long ago, at one of our very first events that I had, I experienced something that was pretty new. And I've been to a lot of events in my life. So to have something this different take place kind of threw me for a loop. I'd gotten into town for the event a little early. One of my good friends had just had a baby. I wanted to go see the baby before the event started, so I stopped by her house, and I take that newborn 4-week-old baby, and I'm holding it, cuddling it, thinking about how wonderful it is that if it cries, I can give it back. And as I'm enjoying this incredible moment, I have just this warm rush that comes over me. And I know most of you are thinking that's emotion, but the baby had actually peed all over my dress. And I had only come into town for a couple of hours, so I didn't bring a backup plan. I did what any mom would do. I gave the baby back, I had no change of clothes, so I walked outside in the sunshine. I pulled my dress away from my body a little bit and let it dry. And then I went straight into that event where I shook hands, I hugged a lot of people. And I'm not gonna tell you what town I was in, because a lot of you that are here tonight were at that event. So it was a first, but it was incredible to think about as I was looking back over the last year and a half and realizing that one of the next firsts will be when that baby takes steps. And when he does, I will be getting sworn in as the very first female governor of the state of Arkansas. And that's a first I'm really excited about. You know, one of the reasons that I'm running, and one of the reasons that we have worked so hard over this last year and a half, is because I absolutely love this state. I love everything about it. I grew up going to every small town, every festival, every little small diner and community that you can imagine. And now my kids have done the same thing. As we've traveled across all 75 incredible counties here in the state of Arkansas, we've gotten to relive and experience and remember the greatness of Arkansas. And it's right here in this room, because the greatness and the beauty of our state is in the people. And that's why we're running, because we love this state, we love the people of this state, and we want to see it be successful. We want to see it thrive. Frankly, I'm tired of watching Arkansas be at the bottom in so many places that I know we deserve to be first. And I look forward to taking us there. I'm running because I want to make sure that when we drop our kids off at school, they're getting educated, not indoctrinated. I want to make sure that our kids, when they go into those school doors, are safe. Today, and the events that took place in Texas are a stark and humbling reminder of just how precious life is. And what an incredible gift that each of us has been given by our Creator to stand here today. Every single life has value, and the most vulnerable among us should be those that we are fighting for and protecting the most. And I can assure you, in my administration, that's exactly what we will do. We will make sure that when a kid is in the womb, they're as safe as they are in a classroom, the workplace, a nursing home, because every stage of life has value. No one greater than the other. That's frankly what sets us apart, because we are a culture that values and protects life. And we'll do everything we can to make sure it thrives and grows and lives successfully. We can and must do better by the children in this state and in this country. I'm running for governor because that little boy that I got to hold, I want to make sure that when he takes those first steps, he gets ready to run, and that the path in front of him is free and clear so that he can run towards whatever it is that he wants. Because that's the beauty of America. It doesn't matter where you start. You get to decide where you will finish. And we're gonna make sure every kid growing up in Arkansas has that opportunity. You know, traveling around the state, I've held a lot of babies and met some of the youngest, cutest Arkansans that we have. But I've also hugged some of our oldest. One of my favorites is right here on the front, Floyd. He's a World War II veteran. He is a true American hero. And each of us in this room are forever indebted to him and those like him. Recently, this past Friday, I was in Harrison, Arkansas, at a place called Camp Jack. It's a veterans center. And I met a man named Vic. who was in his 90s. And just a couple days before I arrived at Camp Jack, Vic was up on a ladder, painting in the rafters. I'd like you to remember that he's 90. He spent his entire life serving in the military. He's never asked for anything, but always been willing to give everything. People like that are what make our state and our country great. And people like that deserve to know that they have a community and a group of people that are fighting with them. I can assure you I will always be one of those people that is fighting for the greatness and the goodness of this country. Arkansas will be the very best because of the people in this room. We're gonna get there, and we're gonna do it together. I can't tell you how thankful I am for each of you. I've said it many times, and I'll say it here again tonight. No candidate for office ever wins on their own. And if they tell you that they did, throw them out, because you don't want them. I can assure you, I know I didn't get here on my own. I got here thanks to an incredible staff who has put in tireless hours, put up with a maybe sometimes intense and high expectation candidate. The many volunteers from all 75 counties who have put out signs in the rain, who have knocked doors, who have made calls, who have raised money and given us the resources to tell our story. You have made it possible. To my friends who have come from all over the country to stand here, who would be my friends whether I was behind this podium or behind a desk or nowhere at all. Those are the people who have gotten me here. Most importantly, my family. I have incredible parents, one who happened to be a pretty good governor himself. I do hate to tell him, though, I hope to take away his title of the best governor that Arkansas's ever had. I have the three most beautiful, incredible, wild, special children anybody could ever ask for: Scarlett, Huck, and George. I've got my brothers that are both here, my sister-in-law, their kids, my entire family, and most importantly, my husband, who has stuck with me no matter what, who is the rock of our family and has carried us. It's a pretty incredible, strong man who will stand by his wife at every second, every day, and never back away from any of it. And he has done it with a smile on his face the entire time, which is pretty incredible because I've met me and I can be a handful. So thank you. And to each of you, thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for the incredible journey that you've been on with us. But don't worry, we're not finished. We've still got a lot more to do, and we're just getting started, because the real work starts in January of next year when we take office and we take Arkansas to the very top. Thank you so much for being here tonight. God bless you. God bless our great state, and God bless America. Thank you all so much. Appreciate it.
The Republican gubernatorial nominee, Sarah Sanders. Gentlemen, no surprises here.
No surprises. I thought Sarah Sanders showed a level of humanity and personableness that has rarely been seen in many of her other kind of public statements. I thought, especially at the opening, I think she clearly becomes more intense and a little edgier when she starts talking about policy, but she is a very charming person who I think shows that she learned very well from her father, who had many of those same gifts during his career in Arkansas. So I thought she was probably the best I've ever seen her in a setting at that opening vignette about talking about this campaign and how it's played out, and then again at the close. So I thought it was a very, she's a gifted communicator. It appeared she did not use notes at all. She was just speaking from the heart, and I thought it was actually a very effective presentation.
Okay, we're going to go to Christina Munoz back at the event center, I think. Lost the signal. We'll try to do that in a second. Well, we were seeing the former governor and the former first lady with their daughter. To echo Jay Barth, I heard echoes of her father. I mean, there was no uhs, no ers, no stumbles, no verbal gaffes, no stumbling along the way. I mean, just as smooth as silk.
Yeah,
Got that gift.
Yeah, and sorry, Robert, but you know, she's not been very visible. I mean, she's certainly done a lot of individual events, but she's kind of run a low-key campaign, really relying upon TV ads. And I think this tonight showed that she needs to go the other direction. I think she would warm up a lot of Arkansans who maybe have some doubts about her if she was showing this side of who she is on a more regular basis to a larger audience.
And now we have Christina.
Hello once again. Yes, as you said, Sarah Huckabee Sanders is just on the stage here, as you all saw, and celebrating now with family and friends and those that came here to support her. Mentioned some of those platforms that we've heard in advertisements all throughout this election season. Talked about students, and the line that she's been using a lot in ads is to educate, not indoctrinate. But of course also referenced that horrific shooting today in Texas and how she, as governor, will do everything she can to keep children safe, especially in our schools. And of course then alluded to a child in the womb, which is of course along the lines of the abortion debate that has been hot and heavy throughout this election season as well. She actually got fairly emotional when thanking the volunteers, thanking her family, and specifically her husband, who has had to really stick by her side through highs and lows of all of this. And of course giving credit to her parents and mentioning the former governor, Mike Huckabee, as well, and sharing the unfortunate news that she believes she will soon be the best governor of the state, not Governor Mike Huckabee. And it will be interesting to see, because she has also been known for making sure people think she's not going to lead like Donald Trump. She's not going to lead like Mike Huckabee. She's going to lead like Sarah Huckabee Sanders if she indeed becomes governor of the state of Arkansas. And of course, a lot of cheers when she says the first female governor of the state of Arkansas, another thing she's been very proud of throughout this campaign. So with more than 80% of the vote, as numbers continue to come in here tonight, an acceptance speech by Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Now, of course, still here and waiting for results to come in, Congressman French Hill as well as Senator John Bozeman. Those numbers continue to come in throughout the night. Both are expected to speak once those races are called or closer to called as we go through the night. So we will remain here and send it back to you for now and let you know when and if those things happen later tonight.
Christina Munoz, thanks very much. And we will be coming back to you right now. Standing by, former Speaker of the Arkansas House of Representatives, Jeremy Gillum, is with us. Mr. Speaker, any thoughts on what you have seen, we have seen thus far tonight?
Well, I agree with the comments that Jay and those and Robert and you made about the speech that Sarah gave. It was great. It was a way to really show who she is in a platform, as was mentioned, that she's not really had yet that for public. And so I think she's off to a great start to be able to transition now towards the general election. And so I'm proud for her and her team, and we'll see what unfolds over the next few weeks as they transition into general election mode.
What do you expect to see in January? We heard very little, essentially nothing from Ms. Sanders in terms of specifics anyway about policy. You want to speculate on what, if she is successful, what the Sanders program could look like? Now, we know taxes, that's on her agenda.
Yes, outside of that, I think she's been very strategic in giving herself flexibility as far as how she would actually execute on the themes that she's touched on, which I think is fantastic, because there's a lot of input that's going to be offered, and so not boxing herself in, allowing her to have conversations with the General Assembly and others in her circle, I think will serve her well in the coming months as she kind of formulates a little bit more of a concrete plan moving forward.
During your tenure as Speaker, and in fact, prior to that, in your tenure in the House of Representatives, the state was already conservative and pretty red. Now it appears to be, certainly in this cycle anyway, profoundly red. Is that populist streak, is it going to continue to dominate Arkansas politics in your estimation?
I think it will for the short term, you know, and of course a lot of that will play out tonight in a lot of the House and Senate races from around the state to the degree that we see it exhibited in the state legislature. But I think Governor Sanders will operate with a tinge of that as well. But I don't know that it stays long term, but I think on the short term, for the next couple of years, I think there will be shades of that in a lot of policy decisions.
The DFNA, Department of Finance, now estimates that whoever is governor is likely to come into office in January without $1.5 billion on hand. Now, you've got some experience in state fiscal affairs. How aggressive can, with a recession possible, distinctly possible anyway, and inflation at the moment fairly rampant, how aggressive can she be? Would you advise her to be in terms of tax reduction?
Well, I think I would probably echo a lot of what Senator Dismang and Representative Lane Jean have said publicly in the last few weeks, and that would be see how this is going to unfold. You know, it's much easier to just be cautious and see kind of how the economy is going to rebound, see what happens with this inflation, you know, just be strategic. And so caution would be what I would advise. I mean, you can formulate aggressive plans, have contingencies, you know, have plans A, B, C, D, E, and F, and then kind of see what variables you're handed, and then pick the plan that fits the environment that you're in when you're in session and in her first term, or first session for her first term. So I think that would be the way that I would approach it. And it's always, you're always going to have a host of people that are going to be coming after that money. And so, you know, being cautious, keeping it in reserves, making sure that we're covered, and that all of the programs and everything that she's identified that she wants to address are taken care of first, I think is not a bad strategy. You can always, towards the end of the session, be able to pivot and transition into a more aggressive mode if those variables are coming in the right way.
All right, former Speaker Jeremy Gillum, now at the University of Central Arkansas. Thanks for being with us. We'll come back with more of our coverage in just a moment. When it comes to news and current events in Arkansas, we keep you informed with Arkansas Week each Friday and Sunday. But what about the rest of the week? Get insights, exclusive previews of our upcoming episodes, and much more by signing up for our public affairs newsletter. Don't miss a thing. Sign up at myarpbs.org/signup and get updates you won't find anywhere else, right to your inbox.
Working the land can leave you with a sense of fulfillment, but it can also be the cause of great mental, physical, and even financial stress. In 2010, the agriculture industry had the highest rate of suicide of any occupation. How are the farmers and ranchers doing now, and how can we change those statistics? We want to hear from you. Share your questions with Arkansas PBS through our social media channels using the hashtag GrowingHopeAR. Email us at paffairs@myarkansapbs.org or leave a voicemail at 501-682-0318. I'm Lauren McCullough. Join me as I host a discussion on stress in the agriculture industry and let our panel of experts answer your questions. Thursday night at 7.
I would never be able to run as many cattle on here as I'm running now the old way I was doing it.
I'm sure there's a lot of farmers still today that think they're doing a great job, and I understand exactly why they think that, because they don't know any different, you know. you know, it's more than dirt. It's a living, breathing ecosystem.
For all Arkansas Week's been keeping you informed of the news and issues that matter most, featuring the newsmakers, the experts, the analysts, the journalists, the thought leaders who shape life and news and opinion in Arkansas. So join us as we continue to provide in-depth conversation, in-depth coverage from our new, modern, state-of-the-art studio home, where we'll cover the news as never before. So stay connected to the pulse of Arkansas with Arkansas Week.
I'm Kat Robinson, and I preach the gospel of Arkansas food.
No.
Really?
No, it is not.
For more than a decade, I've been traveling the state.
Good morning.
Searching out our culinary roots and every great little restaurant and food story I can find.
Hope you made room for pie.
Thank you. Download the PBS video app or watch online.
During the past year, we've been traversing the natural state with our cinematic drone, from lakes and rivers, waterfalls, scenic byways, mountains, swamps, overlooks, and towering rock formations. This unique documentation of all 4 seasons from all 4 corners of the state with an aerial cinematic perspective will give you, the viewer, an Arkansas adventure like never before, exploring Arkansas from above.
Download the PBS video app or watch online.
You know, I think sports are really big to a lot of people, and because it's an important part of our fabric and our community. And the one good thing about what I've seen is it's high quality production. You know, you think of the small communities all over Arkansas, it's a big deal that they can turn on the TV or DVR or whatever and know they're going to get a quality product. And so I think it just expands the focus of what PBS is doing. You know, Arkansas PBS is doing a great job, and I think it's part of education.
What makes a dairy bar different from other food establishments? Here in Arkansas, it describes a whole selection of restaurants we love. It's a location that serves ice cream, burgers, or hot dogs, some having been in existence 50 years or more. Come travel with me on a culinary itinerary of Arkansas dairy bars.
Download the PBS video app or watch online.
And we are back, and we can declare, because others have, I think particularly the Associated Press has declared that Chris Jones is the Democratic gubernatorial nominee. He has escaped a runoff with against 4 other candidates, some better known than others. Mr. Jones, obviously, though, from the start, from the time the ticket closed, I think, gentlemen, Mr. Jones was the odds-on favorite for Robert Kuhn for the nomination.
He, like we talked about earlier, he grabbed it from the get-go. Great ad production, smart guy, obviously very talented.
Great resume.
Yeah, I mean he's a
great family.
He's a great candidate. He's actually raised a significant amount of money. I think. I mean it was almost $2 million. He's got a high burn rate because you have to if you're don't have any name ID. But I mean very impressed with what he's done. I mean it's a difficult road from here, but should be fun to watch.
Yeah, he spent about $1.8 million, which is that's a fairly significant amount. But as Robert said, when you're a first-time candidate trying to get some name ID, and he did what he needed to do. I mean, he won with a significant vote, and sometimes it's hard for the party to unify if you had a lot of divisiveness in there, and I don't think it'll be hard for them to unify behind him. And quite frankly, on the other side, I don't think it's going to be. I know it's not going to be hard for the party to unify behind Sarah Huckabee either. So I think both parties are going to be unified going into the fall election.
Yeah, the other 4 candidates in the Democratic primary really didn't have any money to get. There was no way to be divisive. Really.
Yeah. But Chris Jones is, I mean, one of the most. He's just an incredibly charming person. Who is also just very ambidextrous to be able to talk about faith and science seamlessly the way he did in that inaugural ad. And he's really worked hard, traveled the state of Arkansas, and I think actually kind of fallen in love with the game of politics. He really likes people a lot, and I think that shows in how he interacts with people, with a big smile on his face always. That really pays off.
Yep. Back to Ms. Sanders, who just a moment ago claimed the Republican gubernatorial nomination. I think Speaker Gillum said she remained flexible in her remarks tonight, as she has been since announcing as a candidate, speaking only with a couple of vague exceptions, speaking in the abstract sense. Robert Kuhn?
Yeah, well, I want to echo what...
Not a dumb thing to do, really, if you can do it. It's not.
You know, I thought she came across very genuine and very relatable, right? And I think if you're looking towards November, you obviously have the support of 80% of Republicans. I think the rest of them will coalesce around her. You know, in our polling, you know, she's very much like Donald Trump, very high with Republicans, very low with Democrats, and marginal, you know, gap with independents. I think being relatable, being genuine, you know, changing from the attack CNN to the things that she talked about tonight, those will benefit her in communicating to independents and even probably some Democrats. I don't know that Democrats are necessarily gettable, but maybe some independents that lean Democrat, maybe you pull over. I think policy-wise, you know, there's obviously a ton of money there on the table. The temptation is going to be to cut a lot of taxes. I think that taxes will be cut. I think that's a logical thing to do. I think if she's, you know, she's smart enough to know that I can do a combination of really impressive tax cuts, but also maybe invest in some things that actually are kitchen table issues. Childcare, education, workforce, some things that affect people's lives. I think if she does a combination of those, that becomes a package that's really
You know something
exciting.
we don't? I mean,
that's free advice. I just think that's, if I had a big chunk of money, I would do it all. I wouldn't just invest in one area.
And you know, she noted her father's success as governor. And that's kind of what her father did as governor, right? I mean, he certainly had his ideological moments, but he was just really good at solving the problems of people when it came to health care, when it came to education. And he was not an ideologue when it came to those issues. And I think that would serve her well. Yeah. It would serve her very well.
Yeah, but he always remembered the GOP base, and periodically when he, my interpretation, whenever he would sniff some discontent over on the right, well, suddenly there would appear something that
like
would...
covenant marriage or one of those other issues that really, and of course he remained consistently pro-life, although not as hardcore as some in the Right to Life movement wanted him to be.
And Ms. Sanders mentioned too, abortion, you know, which would seem to be if the vote in June or what comes down later this summer is expected to be, would almost be a moot issue in terms of Roe falling.
Yeah.
What more could the state do?
Well, I think that was clearly a partisan crowd tonight, and that is a crucially important issue with base Republicans.
But there is this also, and this was sort of a discordant note. If I heard Ms. Sanders correctly, and I was trying to look at some numbers at the same time, wanted children to be as safe in the womb as they are in the classroom. Mm-hmm. If that was the quote that I heard. The classrooms have not been terribly safe in recent years for youngsters. So, I mean...
Yeah, I don't recall the exact quote. I suspect she's trying to just, you know, obviously the events of today and the pro-life maybe emphasize the importance of life both inside and outside the womb would probably be the point. Whether that was how it was articulated, I don't remember. But I think it's, you know, that kind of suggests to me that, you know, we're not going to just go cut a bunch of taxes. We are going to talk about other things. There are programs, there are, you know, things that our government provides that maybe we can reform or improve. I think she's smart enough to know that those things have to be tackled too.
Yeah, how you make kids safer in classrooms is a whole different thing. We're going to take a look at some other races. Now, I don't think we have, as a matter of fact, I know we haven't, Marty. We haven't looked at any of the congressional races so far.
We haven't, and I mean, it looks like all our incumbent on the federal level are all cruising to re-election. I mean, it looks like John Bozeman, he's hanging, he's still up there over 50%, and then of course Rick Crawford up in the first has a fairly significant lead, and then in the second, Congressman French Hill has a significant lead, and then Congressman Womack up in the third has a significant lead. So I mean, there's no surprises there. They're all headed to I think some fairly significant wins.
I think Mr. Westerman down in the fourth, I say down in the fourth, we've watched over the years the first and the fourth just get bigger and bigger.
Around in the fourth.
Yeah, but I think Mr. Westerman escaped a primary opponent.
He did.
He's got a Libertarian, I think, in November.
He did, and you're right. His district just keeps getting bigger and bigger. He got Pope County added to it this time. So,
what's interesting, the closest race is in the 2nd district, and Conrad Reynolds is right at 40% against Congressman French Hill, and it appears, although we're still getting kind of bits and pieces, looks like Reynolds ran very well out in the more rural and exurban parts of that district. Obviously, Pulaski County, Congressman Hill's home, has helped save him a bit in that district. It's a closer race out when you get away from his home turf in Little Rock.
Well, you know, he made he campaigned on really some of the far right issues. I mean, he made in his mail pieces and those kind of things. He made that the election was stolen from President Trump. He made that a key issue in his race. So he's gone after the hardcore, hard right, Trump supporters out there.
Yeah, he camped out in front of Mar-a-Lago, I think, a couple weeks ago to get in there to get a photo with Trump so he could put it on a mail piece, which he did, but per earlier, I don't think Trump is that easily transferable. I don't think it's that simple. I think voters, they know. They know if you're really somebody that Trump is investing time and energy in, and that clearly wasn't the case.
Yeah, and they seemed an odd fit. I mean, standing back and look at French Hill and Donald Trump, they seemed, an odd fit.
Yeah,
an uncomfortable fit.
Yeah. I think maybe you're seeing in some of those counties that same, thing that we see in the Senate race with Jan Morgan and Jake Beckett. I mean, there's a group of people that are looking for something different. They're still, they're still the minority. They're still roughly a third, maybe, that are really looking for something different. But they're there, and they're going to be there. And depending on the candidate, Conrad's been on the ballot a few times. Sometimes it's Conrad, sometimes it's Colonel. Been back to Conrad, I think. But you start to, have been known and seen and locally, and maybe you get a little bit more than the 30% that's there.
Another thing to look at when we talk about Sarah Huckabee Sanders is what her strength is going to show tonight in some of the candidates she's endorsed. I was looking earlier at Breanne Davis, Senator Breanne Davis over in Senate District 25, and
that's Pope and Russellville.
It is. It's Pope and Conway County, so it takes in Morrilton and Russellville, and early on, a lot of folks thought she was going to have a little bit of a tough race over there, but Sarah Huckabee Sanders was a college friend of hers, and she came out early and endorsed her. And there's some kind of issue about the casinos over there, which has been an issue in Pope County since they passed it. But Breanne Davis her opponent has conceded, and so she looks like she's reelected. And I think a lot of that, obviously she's a good candidate in her own right, but Sarah Huckabee Sanders' endorsement early on, I think certainly helped her. And then if you look down in Senate District 2, which is Trent Garner's old seat, Matt Stone, which is Trent Garner's father-in-law, and
South Arkansas.
South Arkansas, yep. And he's got a pretty significant lead down there right now in some early vote, and he's another one that she has endorsed. And then there's a few others out there, but anyway, and of course I don't think you can underplay the significant part that her endorsement has played in Senator Bozeman's reelect. It certainly helped him in his reelection. So it looks like she may have a little bit of coattails in the primary in her endorsements.
Yeah. One of the open Senate seats is due to the term limits kicking in, forcing an open seat, which is presently held by the Honorable Joyce Elliott, Democrat of Little Rock, who joins us now. Senator, trust you can hear me. Thanks very much for being with us. Any thoughts on what we've seen so far tonight?
Well, I've just been waiting to be a part of this scintillating conversation. Yeah. I am, like many other people, I'm not surprised at a lot of what has happened. And of course, my big interest has been who was going to prevail. Was it going to be the ones on the extremes or people who are more moderate. You know, having been a part of the Arkansas legislature for, you know, several years and having been a part of this very last one, I had a lot of interest in just who might get elected to be in those seats. Would we have a turnaround in what we saw in this last session? I think that's really important for our state. But it's really, though, important, I think, for us to remember that, of course, the Democrats are on the downside, but there are people who are willing to keep working until we do have an opportunity to turn things around and not just give up and not just give in. I know, for example, you know, the conventional wisdom, and I understand why it is that Sarah would just be the shoe-in, but I feel very confident that it's kind of like anything else. So the conventional wisdom works until it does not. And when knowing what the numbers are in this state of the folks who are not registered and the folks who are registered but not active, and you put those numbers together, that's easily, you know, almost was close to at least close to 1 million people. And so it's just the responsibility of folks who don't want the same thing to get up and do the work. It's not a matter of somebody is just going to win because they're presumed to win. And the people in the state, I think, need to take some responsibility for not just taking my word or anybody else's word. If you want to have change, then you're going to have to get out and do the work and not just go by what the latest what Doris Elliott said or Steve Barnes said. What do you want? You know, what kind of state do you want? And if you want it, you work for it.
Well, let's set
and
aside,
that's what makes a difference. Yeah.
Okay, well, set aside the conventional wisdom for a second, Senator. If you were Chris Jones, the Democratic gubernatorial nominee, how would you campaign? What would you run? What would you tell the electorate?
I would absolutely do. I think Chris Jones, by the way, is running a very, very good campaign. But I would run a campaign that distinguishes well, in this case, that would be Sarah and Chris, but a campaign that shows the difference. Because when you look at one campaign, it's all about buzzwords. You know, we hear buzzwords and that works because you know, you're the radical this, you're the liberal this, or our campaigns have become nationalized and people have become used to that. Chris Jones, I think, needs to run a campaign that is really and truly all about the pocketbook issues that I heard you guys talking about some before in this state, such as, don't I have a right to have broadband? You know, shouldn't we have good housing for everybody in this state? Shouldn't we have pre-K? Shouldn't we have a world-class education in our state? Shouldn't the people who go to work every day and work two jobs be able to have a higher quality of life? I mean, these are the things that are really causing people to hurt. Yeah, it is about milk formula and so forth. That's something that happened just now. It's important, but on a day-to-day basis, people do not know how they're going to get from one day to the next and know whether or not they're even going to have housing. And that's something I think that's really, really important. Talk about those kitchen table issues, but talk about them at a local level that's in people's lives all the time. And I've seen Chris doing that.
Well, follow through with that, if you would, Senator, because right now we have gasoline at $4 a gallon or thereabouts. It could go higher. We have the Federal Reserve planning to kick up interest rates at least 2 or 3 times more this year. It is that's really strong current to swim against.
Mm-hmm. I don't think Chris. I don't think Chris has to try to defend and say it's okay that gas is high, but that's just a given. And I think you have to respect the fact that people are struggling when it comes to just putting gasoline in their cars. So you acknowledge that. And you recognize this is something that is central to people's lives right now, but you also give them hope for their future. Are you always going to have to live in substandard housing? Will you forever be working from paycheck to paycheck just to get by? Will you ever have an opportunity to own a home? Will you ever have an opportunity to start a business? Because the way we do economic opportunity in our state is based on a system that was not built for everybody to be successful. And there are people out there who are working hard and doing everything they know to do to be successful, and they are not being so. So I think Chris has a responsibility to say, just say, yeah, this is difficult. We need to do everything we can to make sure you can get gasoline in your car, that you can get baby formula. But life in the future can be like this if we're willing not to just assume this is the way it has to be. And one of the reasons I think I feel so definite about something like this, maybe I won't be the one who's going to see it, but I've never had the opportunity to just say, well, I'm going to give up and just accept things as they are. If I had done that, I think I would be somewhere in a corner, in a fetal position. So I think we need to strengthen ourselves and decide we're going to fight for what we know we deserve. And that is not a tax break for those who are already doing well. But it is a way of making sure those who are not doing well get to have some money in their pocket via the jobs that they are working. Most people in this state, most of the poor people in this state are working poor. They deserve more than that. That's a challenge for Chris to talk to people about and how it can be done.
When you, in terms though of addressing the system or systematic inequity, structural inequities, you're in fairly treacherous political territory there, are you not, Senator?
I don't know. I don't know how you mean that, because I don't see that how it's treacherous, because the thing that needs to change for people to be able to do better is for us to look at our systems that were built to make sure some folks did well and others didn't get opportunity in that system. So I don't know what's treacherous about that, because it's the sum of us that we ought to be talking about. If I can look at, I don't know, somebody, person A, for example, and see that person A is doing well. You have a nice middle-class job. You have a nice middle-class life. What did it take for that person to have that opportunity to be at that level? That's a systemic thing that's probably helped that to be the case. Why don't we have the imagination then and the wherewithal to turn around and say, okay, that same kind of system that worked for this person, let's make it work for everybody. It's not about some people should do well and others should not. I mean, Chris can run a campaign that's about all of us. And I don't see that as treacherous, because Arkansas can be so much better for everybody. The sum of all of us is what really matters. It's not taken away from other people.
Senator Joyce Elliott, thanks very much for being on our air. Thanks for coming in and joining us. Thank you so much.
You are quite welcome.
All right, come back soon. Back to the race for Lieutenant Governor. I think, Marty, we've got some new numbers in.
Let's see. What do you have over there, Robert? Y'all had something?
Yeah, you guys are following.
I'm looking here and still have Leslie Rutledge at rounding up 53%, Jason Rayford at 15%, and Greg Bledsoe at 11%. And it's showing about 15% of the vote in. So still flirting with, that 50% number. I'd have to look and see what counties are out to really know how that could change, but it's getting a little bit tighter. I would say it's still an opportunity for Bledsoe if the right counties come in, but that's probably where I'd put it.
6-person primary, and of course just a small share of the vote, of the statewide vote.
That's right.
Tabulated so far.
Yeah, but if General Rutledge is able to get to that magic number, it would be quite an accomplishment.
I agree.
I mean, it would be one of the perhaps the most impressive thing we've seen tonight.
There are some races that have been called. Clint Penzo, who is that is Senate District 31 that we talked about earlier. The Associated Press has called that race. He's at 61%, and that was a 3-person race, and a lot of money was spent up there in that race. So he's won that one. I was just looking through here at some of these other races. It looks like they've called it for Mark Lowry in the Treasurers race. He's at 42% reporting. He's got 74% of the vote.
Tough to overcome.
That's that's a tough one. Let's see. There's you know, one of the things to watch tonight is some of these. You know, there were 3 Republicans that when the transgender issue came up in the legislature and the governor vetoed the bill, there were 3 Republicans that voted with the Democrats to uphold the governor's veto, and it was Representative Christensen, Representative Hawk, and Representative Lee Johnson.
Right.
And I saw earlier that Lee Johnson has a pretty significant lead, and they went after him pretty hard on that vote. And he's a physician, and so I think he got into the whole thing of doctor-patient thing there. But Spencer Hawk's in a tight race, of course, for the Senate race, and then Christensen I saw was running second in a 3-person race. So it'll be interesting to see those 3, because I know that issue was big in all those, and I think we're getting a wrap sign.
Yeah, and we're going to go federal here for just a second, but go back to Christina Munoz, and I think she's standing by with Congressman French Hill. Christina.
That's right. Thank you, Steve. We have Congressman French Hill with us tonight. Thank you so much, and congratulations so far.
Thank you, Christine.
What are these nights like for you as these numbers come rolling in?
Well, I think it's a reward for the team that's worked so hard on our campaign, and it's also, I think, a real compliment to my staff that for 7 years has worked for the people of Central Arkansas, because they're there every day answering questions from veterans or people with a Social Security problem. And so I think that's recognition of the hard work our staff does in representing the people for Central Arkansas.
Absolutely. And what do you want to say to the voters tonight that have put you where you are?
Well, first, a big thank you to the voters, and thank you to God above for letting me have the opportunity to serve the people of Arkansas. It's a real honor and a privilege.
Absolutely. And some of these key issues that you have been campaigning on and will continue to campaign on through the November election.
Well, I think when I talk to voters here in our families, inflation is number one. You know, everybody's been talking about the price of gas and food. That's what our families are struggling with. And when you look at paychecks, costs are going up 3 times faster than pay here in Arkansas. And so I think making the Trump tax cuts permanent is an important policy we should pursue if the Republicans take the House back, working with President Biden. I think we need to curtail inflation. And how do we do that? Have the Fed stop printing money, stop spending money that's not prioritized to the federal government, and finally unleash American energy so that we can get back to energy independence, which not only lowers prices for our families, but also helps our allies in Europe.
Absolutely, and I almost hate to bring it up on this joy occasion tonight. There was a horrific shooting today in Texas on the minds of everybody everywhere. What is your opinion on kind of next steps that need to be taken to keep Arkansas kids safe in schools?
It's just heartbreaking. Every parent I know just, almost burst out into tears when they see this, and these were 2nd, 3rd, and 4th graders. Uvalde is a city I know very, very well because I have friends there, and so it's heartbreaking. So first, people should not have guns that have any mental instability. That's what federal law is, and yet we don't seem to be able to make it work. We need to make sure our background check works so that people cannot buy guns. And even at the Santa Fe shooting in Texas a few years ago, that was a case where the guy was not on the background check system and should have been. And finally, how do we help our schools be more secure and hardened? And that's something that I think Congress has appropriated money for, and something that we can do more. How do we help our schools protect these precious children that we have? So there are many, many things to help on this very complicated challenge. But tonight we're all just in shock again as we see little children taken from their families.
As a mom, I grabbed my kids and hugged them very tightly. So moving back to the campaign, what does your schedule and the campaign look like for you between now and November?
Well, we're going to continue to get around the district and meet with citizens, and particularly in Cleburne County, where this is new. They're voting for me for the first time, so I'm trying to get to know all the churches and schools and business associations in Cleburne County. And it'll be great because now I have the whole Greers Ferry Lake. So somehow this summer we've got to figure out a way to take advantage of that.
Perfect for summer barbecues. Thank you so much, Congressman French Hill. Very much appreciated. And that takes us back to, as we've said before, Senator Bozeman is also here, and we are hoping to talk to him briefly as those numbers do continue to roll in. Steve?
Christina Munoz, thank you very much. Here are some numbers that are heartbreaking, grim. I would update what Christina and the congressman were talking about a second ago. The latest from Texas, where the latest slaughter occurred. The toll is now 19 children killed, shot to death, 19 elementary school students, 2 adults, and the shooter apparently killed by a law enforcement officer. So 22 total lives lost today in Texas. Marty.
Well, just looking at a couple other races here, one over in Saline County State House race, R.J. Hawk has been declared the winner of by Associated Press, and of course R.J. of Buzz 103 fame, and of course he calls some of our Arkansas PBS sports games, football and baseball. Anyway, R.J.'s been called the winner, and Richard Womack in House District 90 has been reelected. So these numbers are starting to come in a little bit. We still, State Senate District 22, which is James Sturch, Senator James Sturch up there. We're watching that race, and right now Representative John Payton has roughly a 300 vote lead. It's 45% to 41%, with 43%. How about all the percentage I'm throwing in there? 45% to 41%, with 43% reporting. So that's a close one to watch. The other one.
And if that one goes to a runoff, it's going to be really interesting because it still becomes that Independence County versus the rest of the district. And the name escapes me, the candidate from Sharp County. Kind of presume a lot of those votes are going to go to Payton, but I mean, with Sturch and Payton both being in the mid 40s, I mean that's tight.
and I know toward the end of, or I say toward the end, the last week or so, I know Governor Mike Huckabee came out and endorsed Senator James Sturch and made a radio ad for him, and I know that was kind of my understanding is it's kind of a last minute thing. So if you go into a runoff, that kind of has a chance to get out there a little more. So I tell you what, if none of these other statewide races, like if Leslie Rogers doesn't have a runoff and John Bozeman doesn't have a runoff, then these House and Senate districts that have runoffs are going to be really, really low turnouts because there's going to be nothing else to drive it, and so that'll make those kind of interesting to see what happens there.
The Democratic gubernatorial nominee, I believe, is with us now. Chris Jones. Mr. Jones, I trust that you can hear me.
I can hear you. How you doing?
Well, very, very well. What's the path forward, Chris Jones?
The path forward is engaging every voter. The path forward is having conversations with people across the state in all 75 counties. The path forward is the Walk a Mile in Your Shoes tour that we're going to start. And we're going to ask voters to take a chance on us. And we're going to ask voters to listen to our message of spreading PB&J across the state, preschool, broadband, and jobs. And we believe that message will get us there.
Senator Elliott, perhaps you heard her, but Senator Joyce Elliott was with us just a few moments ago, and she suggested strongly that kitchen table issues should be the approach that you take. Is that, in fact, the direction you're headed?
I mean, I would agree. Again, our message continues to be the importance of spreading PB&J across the state. That's preschool, broadband, and jobs. We're going out talking about high quality education starting with pre-K, talking about strong infrastructure starting with broadband, and we're talking about economic development in every community across the state starting with jobs.
In terms of the mechanics of your campaign, Mr. Jones, obviously the Republican nominee has an enormous fundraising advantage over you. Her treasury is just really significantly larger than yours. How to get around that from your standpoint?
We're going to do everything we can to raise money, and we're going to put boots on the ground because at the end of the day, it's the votes that count. And we have to engage Arkansans in the places that have been forgotten. We have to energize the Arkansans that have been showing up. And together, we're going to work hard to get across the finish line.
What is, if there are 2 or 3 issues that you are going to emphasize, what would you pick?
Well, again, the 3 important issues are PB&J, preschool, broadband, and jobs. Now, those are not the only issues, but when you talk about what I've been to all 75 counties and consistently, whether it's Carroll County or Boone County or Madison County or Ouachita County, folks are saying, I need quality education, starting with pre-K. I need broadband, and I need infrastructure. 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 And I need infrastru and infrastructure, roads and bridges. In fact, one guy, Jim in Louisville, said after a 30-second conversation with him, he said, "I just need my roads fixed." So that's what we're talking about.
But from the standpoint of fiscal stewardship, Ms. Sanders has said that she wants to phase out the state income tax completely. Now, she's going to do it in stages, she says. What is your position on that? Would you advocate a tax cut? Is that responsible?
I am not opposed to tax cuts. However, the math has to add up. And when you talk about cutting out the income tax, that's a major revenue source for a state that has unpaid bills. Our teachers are underpaid. We don't have mental health services in our most rural areas. Our roads and bridges are collapsing. And so the question that you have to ask yourself is, if we eliminate the income tax, then where are the resources going to come from? And if you look at states that have eliminated income taxes, they typically have higher property taxes or higher sales taxes. Because at the end of the day, Arkansas has to have a balanced budget.
Would you propose a highway program or road program? And what would it entail, if you would?
Well, so why don't we do this? I'd love to come back and talk about various specific programs. Certainly we need improved infrastructure. We have some 200 odd bridges that are on the verge of collapse. We are bottom 5 in terms of infrastructure. So there's certainly roads and bridges. In fact, I drove to Magnolia this weekend twice. And when you think about the roads that we had to drive over to get there, they're causing strain on drivers because now I have to fix my tires. So we certainly will have a robust transportation program, and I'd love to come back on and go in depth with you about it.
Chris Jones, thank you very much for being with us. I think that we do have some broadband issues, but at least on the video channel anyway. But Mr. Jones, thanks very much for being with us. We'll see you in November, and probably before then. Back to Christina Munoz now. I think she has Senator John Bozeman.
Yes, we are. Actually, he's coming straight up to stage as we speak. Good evening, Senator Bozeman. I'm good. How are you?
I'm great.
Wonderful.
I'm very happy tonight, so that's good.
Congratulations as the numbers are coming in. What has it been like for you tonight?
Well, it's been busy, but we're so grateful. I've had such a good staff at my state level and then in Washington. And I think, we've worked hard for the people of Arkansas, and I think they appreciate that. And we're going to continue to do just that.
Wonderful. And so I know that there was a room to the side here where you got to address supporters. Tell us a little bit about what you said to them.
Well, I really made reference to my old days when I was playing football at Arkansas. You had times when you were trying to make the team, and then after that was over, you came together and became part of the team. And that's really what we as Republicans need to do now is regroup. The primaries will be over not only in our state but throughout the country fairly soon. And then Republicans need to get to work and get on the same page and start solving some of the problems that are going on in the country right now.
And you really had 3 other candidates during this race. So talk about what it was like to be against them, what the race was like for you, and how to really come out on top. Right now, 57% is fairly impressive.
Well, we just tried to take our message to the people. And then again, I've been out and about the state as much as anyone else, and really just communicating and then just not only saying but actually doing. It's easy to say these things, but we've worked really hard to keep our promises and do what we've said in Washington and just have a great respect for the state, its people, great love, and want to continue to serve the people in that way.
And as you alluded to already, there has been some division within the party itself. What kind of things need to happen from the Republican Party moving forward to all get behind and together for the November election?
Well, I think we always have this. Primaries are very difficult. And so it's just a matter, and it doesn't matter if it's Republicans or Democrats, you work hard for your candidates, but then, you move on. And the most important thing is for us to gain control as Republicans of the Senate and the House. And that's going to take all of us working together.
Well, congratulations to you again on a successful evening, and we'll let you go enjoy the celebration. Thank you very, very much. And Steve, we'll send it back over to you.
Christina Munoz, thanks very much. Senator John Bozeman with an early, seemingly commanding lead anyway in the senatorial primary, Jay.
Yeah, he's about 58%. And he's really just glancing around those counties that are coming in. He's running at majorities in almost every county. I mean, it's a very resounding win. Some of the more kind of urban counties, he's running stronger in than maybe some of the rural counties. But he's easily exceeding the threshold for a runoff to avoid a runoff really in every county.
Pushing
So he's
60.
Yeah, he's run a. I think he exceeded expectations. I think my expectation, I felt like he would avoid a runoff, but I felt it was more like a 52-53 gaining of that threshold rather than this really dominant win tonight.
Yeah, Robert Kuhn, if the senator is in fact running stronger, and I think he is, than most people anticipated, why is he doing that?
Well, I think a lot of the momentum at the end of the campaign was headed his way. I think, having Sarah Huckabee Sanders do an ad for him was helpful. When we did the polling, there was a pretty large undecided. I think the undecided broke for Senator Bozeman. I think if you look at the numbers that Jake Beckett and Jan Morgan have today, compare those to what the polling showed, they're basically the same. I think they had reached their saturation and just ended up hovering right there, and I think he got the benefit of the doubt from people. I mean, if you kind of look up and down, incumbents did generally well tonight. Congressmen, people with ballot titles, they did well. I think the benefit of the doubt, people gave him to John Bozeman.
Well, there is heavy television in the last 2-3 weeks, and it was Trump, 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 Trump in every spot.
And Sanders.
And Sanders.
Well, and Sanders,
which
too.
is just as good.
Yeah, well, yes, it's synonymous, one might say. Marty?
I'm sorry, I was looking at
I
more.
thought you had a legislative race.
No, I was looking at more in the control booth. They were throwing me off, asking me something. No, there's election results coming in on some of these legislative races that we're keeping an eye on.
Yeah, well, Robert Kuhn was saying just a second ago that it was apparently a fairly good night for incumbents thus far, anyway, from what we're looking at.
I think on the statewides, for sure. Congressionals, for sure. I think redistricting changes things at the state legislative level, brings geography into play. Maybe it doesn't trickle down quite that far.
Sure. Yeah,
but it's certainly not a change election it's the opposite of that, in my view.
Senate District 17, which we were talking about earlier, which is right here, Senator Mark Johnson and Representative Spencer Hawk is still close. It's 52-48 with Mark Johnson with the lead with 54% reporting. So that's tight, which is how we expected it to go tonight. And then up in Senate District 22, which is another one we were watching, John Payton still has the lead at 45-41. And then the other one we mentioned, Senate District 28, which is Bob Ballinger's reelect. You have Brian King with the lead at 32%. Bob Ballinger is in second place with 26, and there's 50% reporting there. Representative Schlapp is in third place right now at 19%. So I mean that's certainly headed toward a runoff. It looks like it'll be a King-Ballinger rematch, but there's 50% reporting. So Representative Schlapp is certainly not out of it. He's within striking distance. I tell you one that's interesting is we hadn't talked about much is Senate District 3, which is Senator Charles Beckham. And he's in a tight race right now with Steve Crowell, who is from Magnolia. He's a city councilman from Magnolia, and that race is Steve Crowell's in front right now, 52-48% with 51% reporting. And this is one of those races, if you remember back during the legislative session, Steve Crowell came to town and the chamber had a fundraiser for him, and some of the more further right senators didn't care, or actually just a lot of the incumbent senators didn't care for that. But he's one of the Commerce for Action candidates that run some ads on his behalf. But anyway, it's 52-48. It's close. It's one to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and that was a real kidney punch campaign too, and one in which you had the chamber.
Yeah, the chamber. The chamber came in and is going pretty hard against the incumbent, it looks like it's going to go to the wire.
Right. And our live coverage will continue. We ask that you keep watching. Stay with us live on the Arkansas PBS YouTube channel or our Facebook page. Thanks very much for being with us. Beckham's.
%90-something in. They haven't called it yet, though. Are we back? All right, Steve, we're back.
Bill's a fairly good game. Back up.
We're on YouTube.
Oh, we're on YouTube now. Thanks for joining us, staying with us anyway on our YouTube channel. Marty, you were talking a second ago about largely Garland County candidate, Senator Sample.
Senator Bill Sample. We talked about this real early in the broadcast, and he's the incumbent over there in Garland County. Takes in a little bit of Saline, but mostly Garland County, and Matt McKee is his opponent over there. And there's 94% reporting, and the Associated Press hadn't called it yet, but McKee is holding on to about a 300-vote lead. It's 52-48 with not a whole lot of votes left. So that's. That could be the first incumbent that I've seen that may not get reelected tonight.
Yeah, still some votes to be tabulated, of course, on all those races, guys.
Yeah, I'm still. I think the Supreme Court races remain. At least one of them remains outstanding, and it's not so much who's going to be in the lead, but the question is whether Justice Robin Wynn is able to get to 50% and mean that he would not have a runoff in the fall. And, judicial elections in Arkansas are just very strange in this structure, in that we have a relatively small electorate in the primary, and then we have a much larger electorate in the fall. It's like a whole different race. And it's going to be a much tougher race, I think, in some ways for Robin Wynn. If he could get through tonight, that would obviously be a big win for him, and he's right on the cusp.
Sure. The character, too, of these judicial races has changed a bit over in recent years.
Yeah, and, we've seen outside money really come into these races, dark money. We have not seen it very much in this cycle to date. There's been a little small stuff here and there, but nothing big, nothing mammoth on TV. And I think that is almost inevitable that it will happen in the fall if there is a runoff, that outside money will get involved. Now, I think some of those interests, more conservative interests, feel like they've kind of gotten their majority on the court already, and so it's not as there's not as much interest in doing it as there would have been a few cycles ago, where the court was very much in a much more evenly balanced between more moderate and more conservative justices. Now it's a pretty conservative court, but I think still, there will be some outside money if there is a runoff in that race, and I think that's going to be a real challenge for Robin Wynn.
And right now it's Judge Chris Carnahan that's in second place, and of course he's got a a history with the Republican Party. He was former executive director of the Republican Party, so you can't put you can't talk about partisan stuff on your races. But if it's part of your resume, you just put your resume on there. Then,
right.
I don't know how you get around that.
Yeah.
Of course, Robin Wynn was a Democratic legislator back in the day, a very different day.
Yeah.
Probably won't be on the mail piece.
Probably not on the mail piece.
Robert. Yeah, I was going to ask Robert Kuhn thoughts.
Yeah, I think we talked about earlier about the resources it requires to run statewide. I think maybe there were folks in this race that thought the dark money would come just because it had played in their favor in the past. That didn't happen. David Sterling benefited from it, I think, a couple of times, and it didn't show up this time. And so, I would feel like, if Robin Wynn doesn't make it to 50, you have to assume at least somebody's smelling blood in the water to see, maybe they could clip him. I don't know if his voting record warrants somebody wanting to take him out. I think Jade alluded to his background being Democratic, and there's clearly a Republican-oriented candidate on the ballot. It makes you assume it'll come, but I think people thought it would come this time, either in this race or the other Supreme Court race, and it didn't come there either.
Well, you know, when it was in the Supreme Court race against Goodson, I mean, it was the general election that it came. It wasn't in the primary. It was a three-way primary as well, and Sterling made that runoff, if I'm not mistaken.
There was dark money in that primary,
oh, was
too.
there? Okay.
Yeah, there was.
Yeah. Maybe it just wasn't.
I was working for one of the other candidates. He got the dark money attack, so I remember. Most people might not.
Yeah, when it's coming down on your head, you remember when it's coming down on your head, don't you?
Well, speaking of dark money, one race where dark money has gotten very involved is a prosecutor's race in Pulaski and Perry counties. It has become one of the bigger dollar races in the state, and it is an incredibly close race. Lisa Walton, who got support, outside money from the Soros operation. She's got a very tiny lead over Will Jones, who got a lot of outside money of his own from more conservative groups.
Pulaski just updated that one.
Pulaski has, okay, so it looks like Jones has gone back ahead today. So it looks like that one.
I don't know that that's final, but
come back to that in just a second. One of the three Democrats who wants to go to the United States Senate. We heard from Senator Bozeman, the incumbent Republican, who by all appearances has just won renomination tonight. We're going to go to Natalie James. Again, one of three Democrats who is seeking her party's nomination.
I'm here with Natalie James, who is one of the three Democrats running to face Senator John Bozeman, who has just seeked the nomination. Natalie, how do you feel with the lead in the race so far?
Right now, we're seeing the South is coming in, and we're seeing the numbers still coming in. I feel fairly confident that right now we will see the Democratic frontrunner be presented within the next 20 minutes, and I'm extremely excited about that. Family's excited, and I know the state's excited to have real representation to represent all of Arkansas.
There were you and two other candidates. How are you able to get a majority with three candidates in there and avoid getting into a runoff?
Well, you have to put in the work. You have to meet people where they are. You have to talk to people, and you have to listen. I think that's the biggest thing. Being a mother, that's natural. Being a realtor, that's natural. My first thing is to get in there and actually talk to people, meet them where they are, go knock on their doors, ask them what their issues are, and listen. So I think that's what's putting me ahead, because I took the time to actually go out and meet people.
Mm-hmm. If the results continue and you do get to the general election, one of the challenges will be President Joe Biden's approval rating is very low in this state. How do you overcome that, or would you just try to distance yourself from the president?
I don't think I would distance myself from the president. The approval rating is low, and what we're showing is because we're not showing the full demographics of the whole state. And so you can't get an actual real number when you only have 22% of the state actually giving their input. So hopefully we can actually get out there, get some real numbers, organize like we need to, knock on some doors, and actually ask people what their actual feeling is to what the president is doing and how the president is doing, and know and explain that it's not just the president, it's your Senate, it's your House of Representatives that made the decisions that directly affect you, and your JP and quorum court. So I think that's the first step, educating our state and letting them know where and who is directly affected and what's happening in their daily lives.
Well, thank you for your time. Back to you, Steve.
All right, thanks very much. And that was Noak Patel of KUAR Public Radio with Democratic senatorial candidate Natalie James. Gentlemen, we're getting close to the conclusion of our broadcast coverage tonight. We've got one more distinguished guest coming up, though, in just a second, a familiar face to Arkansas PBS viewers. But Marty, any thoughts?
Well, there's there's a lot of races out there, and there's going to be a lot of late nights out here for some of these folks. You know, one Mary Bentley looks like she has a fairly good lead over in Perry County, and she's got part of Faulkner County now. She had a strong opponent in a Justice of the Peace from Faulkner County, and Rose Rowland, and they hadn't called it yet, but it's a 59-41 lead. There's. I tell you, another one is in the State House District 61. A bit of surprise is David Hillman, who is over in Arkansas County, and he's been over there a long time, and he's behind a young newcomer to politics, Jeremiah Moore. Jeremiah Moore is at 55%, and David Hillman's at 31%. that's 64% reporting. So to me, that's a big surprise in that race. So that's another incumbent that looks like they might be in a little bit of trouble. So there's as these things start to come in, there's some interesting things to still watch out there. Robert, what you got anything you're seeing over there?
Oh, I had a note. Let me see if I can find it. Just some more Faulkner County. Matt Brown defeats Chris Corbett in Faulkner County. Trent Minner defeats Kim Slaughter in Faulkner County. Not sure the Rose Roll and Mary Bentley. They had some numbers, but nothing's final there.
Well, while we're waiting for some numbers to come in, here's our old friend from Arkadelphia, Ouachita Baptist University, emeritus political science professor, Hal Bass. Hal, thanks for coming in tonight. Thanks for being with us. How you doing?
It's great to be with you.
Any thoughts on what we're seeing so far tonight?
Well, it's interesting in that you expect primary elections to be relatively unpredictable. You don't have the party queue to shape voter behavior, particularly in years ending with 2 after redistricting. You've got different lines and more volatile elections there. But tonight's been pretty typical, it seems to me. What conventional wisdom had going seems to be forthcoming here.
In terms of let's take Senator Bozeman off the top here anyway. He seems to be, as we have noted here, outperforming expectations by several percentage points. Are you surprised by that?
I guess I'm surprised he's outperforming the 50% barrier. In other words, I'm not surprised he's winning without a runoff, but he's a little bit above what I would have thought. I think the real point is that his opponents are underperforming here and not rising to the expectations that were out there.
Anything in the Arkansas returns tonight that would lead you to think that in terms of the temperature of the Arkansas electorate, and particularly on the Republican side, populism would seem to be still in vogue, quite the rage, in fact, but not to the extent that it is benefiting, at least so far anyway, some of those challengers on the that are even farther to the right than the incumbents. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's generally been a fairly good night for the more establishment Republicans here. Certainly Arkansas is solidly in the Republican ranks, but it has not drifted farther to the extremes in this set of elections.
Hal, in terms of what we're likely to see out of assuming that she prevails in November, the Republican nominee. Now, I'm going to go ahead and let the audience know that she was once a pupil of yours. What would you expect to see from her administration?
I would expect to see a tone more like you saw tonight and less like you saw during her time as presidential press secretary. I think the nature of that role put her in a more strident, combative stance than she is going to present as a general election candidate and as a likely governor here. I think the role model would be more her father's tenure as governor, where certainly there is an ideological perspective that's presented, but it's a kinder and gentler version than what we saw coming from the White House podium.
Well, she has been largely, as she was tonight, and indeed since the campaign began, largely thematic in her public statements. Now, that's smart politics, but at some point, or will she at some point, have to get specific? Mr. Jones says he's going to get specific.
Well, I think there will certainly be opportunities, and if she's successful, necessities to get specific. But I heard some of your commentary earlier in the evening. I think she is giving herself lots of elbow room to maneuver when the time comes, and she's not going to have herself unnecessarily pinned down by campaign rhetoric.
Hal Bass there in Arkadelphia. Thanks very much for being with us tonight. Thanks as always for joining us.
Gladly.
Thanks for your insights. Flexibility, I think, was the term earlier that Ms. Sanders was
I think that's what
to benefit from, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what we saw tonight. Now, she, it was so unlike her boss. It was so much more like her father in terms of her tone tonight. I mean, she did not go out and pick fights unnecessarily. It was instead just the opposite, much more a real warmth that I think will serve her well. And I think she's got enough of a advantage in this cycle where she doesn't necessarily have to pick fights unless she wants to. And I'm sure she will pick them occasionally for certain audiences, but she could probably has enough of an advantage where she could kind of cruise on a more kinder, gentler tone that I think would probably set her up for more success in the legislative arena. I do think what we're seeing in terms of these legislative races, we're not seeing, a populist slate of legislators who are just dominant, which I think would have put her in a trickier spot where she really had to work with those legislators as the dominant force. I think now we're seeing more of a mixed bag, which gives her, again, more flexibility, more ambidextrousness when it comes to her policy leadership.
Yeah, as Hal just indicated, some of the more, at least based on the numbers that we've seen so far, some of the more extreme right candidates, thus far anyway, haven't proved successful. But it is interesting anyway, the impulse apparently of some in the political class anyway. It would be hard to, and Marty, you and I have talked about this before, it would, in many instances, it's hard to envision somebody getting to the right of some of our incumbents, but that doesn't stop them from trying in so many instances.
Yeah, that's right. But I would also say that, even if there are, those right of center candidates that are winning, incumbents winning, they're not winning with 83.5% like Sarah Huckabee is, Sarah Huckabee Sanders is. So, I mean, she's the standard bearer, right? Even if there's policy disagreements, I think it's always going to be in the back of their mind that, they have to be careful because she's going to be carrying the big stick. She's the one that is, almost, her approval ratings are 90%. She's getting 83% of the vote. They know that she is, she's the major vote getter here. I think everybody does.
Yeah, if you look at the legislative races, the congressional races, the senatorial races in these primaries, all of the candidates are to the right of the incumbent. Yeah. But not getting any traction, much.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, in just a second, we had Marty. You got some fresh legislative numbers.
Well, yeah, there's. We talked about Lee Johnson a while ago. He's a state representative, House District 34, 47. He's been, Associated Press has declared him the winner. And what was the other one I was looking at? Then over in this is Mark Lowry's seat over in Maumelle. It was an open seat, and Brandon Aker is winning big against Wes Booker, 76-24. What's interesting about that race, Brandon Aker is a pharmacist, and Wes Booker, he's a Southeastern Conference football official. And I was waiting for somebody to, somebody sent out a piece of mail because. I don't know if he called that Auburn-Arkansas game or not, but being an SEC official might not be the best place to be running for office in Arkansas.
Don't make the wrong call.
Yeah. But no, but he looked like he'd be a strong candidate. But Brandon Aker is winning that one big. So and that's a Republican seat.
Yeah.
And then. Looks like John Wycliffe is winning that primary over there that, Jay, you were talking about earlier against Robert Steinbuch.
Yeah, Pulaski.
Yeah.
Okay, we have, well, I misstated a moment ago. We have one additional very distinguished guest, Heather Yates of the Political Science faculty at the University of Central Arkansas. Heather, thanks for coming aboard tonight.
Hi, it's good to see you, everybody.
Give us your thoughts. What are we looking at tonight? What have we seen?
So heading into this evening, what I was interested in is the performance of incumbency advantage, and this has already been discussed a little bit on the panel. But we saw that the incumbency advantage held, and in the very terms of political science and the political science concepts is that the incumbency advantage holds because a lot of our congressional delegation tonight, representatives of Congress, all referenced their constituent services, which is a part of that incumbency advantage. Also, we saw across the night, and this has been discussed on your panel as well, is that some of these campaigns were low information campaigns. Voters did not really have a whole lot of sense of what was going on in the campaign. They didn't really maybe know who the candidates were. And so that's where incumbency advantage really helped some of our establishment Republicans get reelected. Something else that I was looking at as well is the tone and tenor and how that would play out tonight in the GOP primaries. There's this intra-party struggle within the GOP, and it seemed like there was this real ideological litmus test, an ideological purity test being undertaken with GOP challengers to the establishment incumbent Republicans. And so any kind of disagreement or any kind of perceived critique of the former president drew a challenge and the framing of Republican in name only, read as not loyal to the former president. So that was also very intriguing as a dynamic playing out. And furthermore, the endorsements that Sarah Huckabee Sanders did give out were to establishment Republicans, right? And so I know it was discussed on here earlier this evening about Sarah Huckabee Sanders' coattails. I would like to reframe that a little bit, is that she backed Republican establishment candidates because she also understands incumbency advantage. So I'm not sure it was that she had long coattails tonight, but she understands the dynamics of incumbency. And we're seeing that play across the board. And that's really remarkable because it holds up. It holds up under a really remarkable test in Arkansas tonight.
Based on what you've seen thus far tonight, Heather Yates, do you see an opening in any real, or to what extent, if any, do you see an opening for the Democrats come November?
So for the Democrats, something that I'm paying attention to and slightly concerned about is their fundraising, right? Because Democrats are notably, and the research shows this, at a disadvantage with raising dollars when compared to the Republican counterparts. So the way forward is, and the candidates tonight have said this, they are going to have to get busy with asking for that cash for the general election. I think especially for Chris Jones, he expended a lot of money for the primary challenge, and that's not unusual. A lot of candidates will raise and spend money and go into a general election slightly depleted. But the way forward, and this is something that Jones and others in the Democratic Party demonstrate very aptly, is that to make up for some of those financial losses, they make up for with retail politics. They go through shoe leather. They go out and they shake hands and they talk to people. And I think that's one way that the Democrats do offset the Republican fundraising advantage quite well. So that being a path forward in terms of strategy. Something else that's playing very well with the Democrats is that they tonight are all focused on the policy message. They have a policy, they have a plan, and they're branding that message. Chris Jones did that very well tonight. And that's something that we're not really hearing on the Republican side. And I think right now the Republican victors, the candidates, the incumbents, they're taking their victory lap. And so I think what we see is a path forward through just sheer strategy. It can be done. It's a lot of work and it's a headwind. They know it. But I think they're going to lean into that, and that also helps rebuild the party on the ground. Even if they maybe don't snag the victory in November, it helps them it helps build the party on the ground.
Well, to make any progress in the in the autumn campaign, they're going to have to really energize voters over there in terms of turnout. Can messaging do that in this current climate?
So something that we see in general election cycles is a bump in voter turnout. However, this being a midterm year, not a presidential year, that's also another headwind. Messaging can turn voters out if voters understand who the person is, recognize the person, know what they stand for, and raise that information level of the voter. When voters don't really understand who is where on what policy spectrum, they're not motivated to turn out if it's just on policy. Now, in that absence of a policy message, we see candidates try to cue emotional motivations. And we see this a lot on the Republican side. So I think something that the Democrats are going to have to do is lean into that message, stick with the message on policy, right? They've got policy proposals, but also they are going to have to counteract the emotional cues that their opponents are going to put out there. Okay, and so that is a heck of a headwind. They know that they have that. They can energize voters. Plus, we have a finite time cycle here. So we've got a kind of short-term campaign, a finite calendar, but we don't know what's going to happen on the ground. Like the terrain's going to shift. We've got Supreme Court decisions that are going to be handed down this summer, and we've got a lot of other developments that are going to happen in the federal administration, and we've also got developments on the ground. So as long as the Democrats can be responsive, adaptable, and craft a message to be responsive in the moment, that will give them a very strong, I think, presence heading into November that will motivate voters, because that's where right now a lot of voters are now finally snapping to the election. They're paying attention. They'll start paying attention around August for the general election in November.
Well, I mean, we haven't brought it up tonight, although we certainly haven't avoided it. Is Arkansas ready for an African-American gubernatorial nominee?
What's amazing about tonight, and I thanks Steve for bringing this up, because we've got history made on both sides of the aisle. We have our first woman gubernatorial nominee, and we have our first Black man gubernatorial nominee. So either way, we're making history. That's going to be the question put to the voters in November that Chris Jones is leaning into. Are you ready? Yes, we are ready. There are two different messages being presented. Chris Jones is talking about a way forward. This is a new way for Arkansas to progress forward. And then the Republicans are going to be leaning into status quo. Things are fine. So I think absolutely Arkansas is ready to elect a Black governor. And I think there's going to be some messaging this fall that you're going to see a bifurcation of this message. And Chris Jones is one of the really most qualified candidates that we've seen just when we're comparing Arkansas to other states in the nation. So we have an incredibly well-qualified candidate. So yeah, there's definitely that question out there. And I think from the big picture, the big aerial view looking at, of course, Arkansas is ready to do whatever it wants to do, right? It's just going to be how is that framed for the November election.
Heather Yates of the UCA Political Science faculty, thanks very much for being with us tonight. Marty Ryle, closing thoughts?
Well, you know, it's going to be a late night for some of these legislative races, and I think something that Jay said a few minutes ago is true. There's no clear, broad pattern here of you know, some of these further right candidates being, you know, the populists kind of overtaking them, or vice versa. That it's more looks like it's more, you know, locally politically driven in these races. And I mean, just looking at some of the discrepancy, and it's interesting in the turnout. If you look at some of the vote total, because all these lines have just been redrawn, so they're all virtually the same as far as you know, population base, but the vote totals in some of these things are very widely so regarding turnout.
I think he's saying at least some politics is local.
That's right. Yeah, and some politics is local, but even local politics is going to be affected by national, and maybe now with us living in a time of war abroad, even international events may affect it, right? I mean, we know that much of the challenges with gas prices and other things is driven by events,
flour, wheat,
well around the world, and those matter. And these candidates, Sarah Sanders, Chris Jones, even the state legislative candidates, they have no real power to affect that, but they themselves are going to be affected by it, and they're
kind of like running for lieutenant governor, you know.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm sorry, but it looks like Leslie Rutledge, you know, she's still at 55%. So, I mean, if that holds up and there are no statewide runoffs, I mean, all bets are off on these legislative races that go to runoffs, because you're going to be talking about a very small handful of folks is who can get their people out. And so, you know, whatever the results are, hit or not, it doesn't matter when it comes to the runoff.
Yeah. Which would also be historic, Craig, I think, with her being a female nominee for lieutenant governor, right? So, I mean, that adds to the diversity conversation we were having earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah. Robert Kuhn, Jay Barth, Marty Ryle, thanks for being part of the panel tonight.
Thanks, Lee.
Thank you.
And that wraps us up for this evening. Again, it's going to go way past midnight anyway for some of these legislative races. You'll be in bed, and probably so will we. Thanks very much for being with us. See you next time.